Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If Deku Had the Power of Rogue? Chosen One 123 wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. Island Expo Gala. The grand hall glittered like something out of a dream. Chandeliers shimmered above rows of polished marble, and glass walls opened onto the night skyline of Island. The world's brightest scientists, pro-heroes, and investors mingled in tailored suits and flowing gowns, the hum of conversation underscored by a live orchestra. Izuku tugged at the collar of his rented suit, fidgeting with his gloves. He'd gotten ready early, too anxious to sit still. But when Hikari had told him to meet her here, she hadn't mentioned this. The crowd parted as two figures entered. Melissa in a sapphire dress that caught the light with every step, and Hikari in a sharp, tailored outfit, black jacket, dark green trim, boots polished to a shine. Both carried themselves with effortless confidence. Izuku froze. His jaw nearly dropped. Holy! He snapped his mouth shut before finishing, his face flushing crimson. Hikari smirked as she approached, every bit of her calm, witty self. What? Never seen me in something other than a tracksuit. Izuku fumbled, cheeks burning. I mean yes, but not like. He tugged harder at his collar, blurting, You both look amazing. Melissa blinked, her cheeks flushing pink at the words. She ducked her head quickly, adjusting her glasses with a small, almost shy smile. Hikari's brow twitched upward, that spark of jealousy flickering sharp and fast. She leaned in closer, catching his gaze. Careful, Midoriya. Say that too generally and people might get the wrong idea. Izuku blinked, then looked at her properly, really looked. His eyes softened, his voice earnest. No. You look incredible, Hikari. The words hung heavier, his full attention fixed solely on her now. Hikari's smirk curled wider, victorious and warm all at once as she straightened his tie with a casual flick. Melissa shifted beside them, lips pressed together in a polite smile, but the blush on her cheeks didn't fade. The way Izuku's eyes lingered on Hikari, the way he didn't even glance back at her, left a quiet ache she refused to voice. Melissa stepped up beside them, linking her arm through Hikari's. Well, gentlemen and ladies of science, prepare yourselves, UA's finest have arrived. Izuku exhaled shakily, realizing too late that everyone's eyes were on them. Not just because of Hikari and Melissa, but because Exodus himself was standing in the middle of the gala, dressed like he belonged. For once he almost believed it. The music swelled as servers glided through the hall with trays of crystal glasses and hors d'oeuvres that looked more like artwork than food. Melissa guided them from circle to circle, seamlessly introducing them to scientists, pro-heroes, and dignitaries. Professor Yen, this is Midoriya Izuku, UA's sports festival champion, and Hikari Aizawa, also of UA, Melissa said smoothly. Izuku bowed a little too stiffly, nearly bumping into a waiter. Ah, nice to meet you, sir. Yen raised an eyebrow but shook his gloved hand. Behind him, Izuku could hear the whispers, sharp and hushed. That's the boy who drains quirks. Exodus, right? Should he even be here? Looks normal, but you can't tell with ones like him. The words pressed against his ears like static. His smile tightened. His gloves suddenly felt too hot. As the group moved on, Izuku leaned toward Hikari, voice low. What were you and Melissa doing earlier? You said girl time, but... Her green-gold eyes flicked toward him, then she smirked. Trade secrets. He frowned. Hikari, Before he could finish, she tapped his chest with one finger, grin widening. Relax. If it were bad, I wouldn't be here in heels, dragging you around this circus. Then, before he could argue, she leaned up and kissed him with her quirk on, quick, sly, but enough to short-circuit his thoughts. When she pulled back, her smirk had softened. See? Now stop overthinking. You're supposed to be enjoying yourself. Izuku flushed crimson, the whispers in the background fading. Why you can't just... I can, she said, tugging on his sleeve. And I will. Now smile, genius. People are staring. Melissa glanced back, catching the tail end of their exchange, and her lips twitched with a knowing smile. You two really do balance each other out. Izuku straightened, still red as a beet, and forced himself to lift his chin. For a few moments, the stares and whispers didn't matter, because Hikari's hand was in his, steady as ever. The orchestra faded as the lights dimmed, leaving the stage bathed in gold. David Shield stepped up to the podium, voice rich and commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and honored guests, he boomed, tonight we celebrate not only science but the unyielding spirit of progress. Heroes are only as strong as the tools we forge for them, and the future of peace lies in that partnership. Polite applause rolled across the crowd. Melissa stood near the front with Hikari and Izuku, her eyes bright with pride for her father. Curtains pulled back behind David to reveal the centerpiece, a sleek, silver device glowing faintly blue in its glass case. This technology, David declared, ensures that no matter how volatile a quirk may be, society will always have an answer. The applause swelled, a polished wave of approval echoing through the gala. But Izuku's chest tightened. The word volatile pressed against his ribs like a brand, as if the spotlight had shifted and pinned him there. He could already feel the stares again, whispers rippling at the edge of the crowd. To his right, another weight pressed in. All Might, standing tall in his suit, cape gleaming under the lights, smiling for the cameras. But his eyes, when they slid toward Izuku, weren't smiling. They were wary. Haunted. Izuku's jaw clenched, the faintest tremor running down his arm. Beside him, Hikari's hand found his glove, fingers curling around with quiet force. Her expression stayed neutral, but her eyes cut toward the stage like knives. To everyone else she looked calm, collected. But Izuku felt the tension in her grip, the silent promise beneath it. They can say volatile all they want. I won't let them cage you. Melissa, on Izuku's other side, didn't clap. Her hands hovered at her sides, her face pale against the blue shimmer of her dress. She forced a smile when someone glanced her way, but her eyes betrayed her, wide, unsettled. She knew what David's words meant. She knew the subtext wasn't hypothetical. Her gaze flicked to Izuku and guilt coiled in her chest. He's talking about you. And my father's the one building the weapon for it. For a moment, Izuku felt the weight of both of them at his sides. Hikari's defiance, sharp as steel, and Melissa's guilt, heavy as lead. The orchestra swelled, cameras flashed, the gala kept breathing like nothing had happened. But under the chandeliers, with All Might's haunted stare on him and David's words still hanging in the air, Izuku's own breath came ragged. He wasn't Exodus here. He wasn't Midoriya Izuku either. He was a problem they were already preparing to solve. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The alarm screamed. Security lockdown in progress. All guests remain in place. Steel shutters slammed over the glass walls. Armed drones dropped from the ceiling, glowing crimson. Panic tore through the hall. Guests shouted, stumbled, clawed for exits already sealed. Melissa went pale, clutching her tablet. No, this isn't part of the expo. Hikari's eyes flared green, her quirk radiating faintly as she seized Izuku's gloved hand. Stay with me. Izuku glanced down at himself. No multi-tool, no gear, just a stiff suit and his gloves. And when his gaze flicked up again, he caught All Might staring at him, wide-eyed. For a split second, it wasn't the symbol of peace looking at him. It was Toshinori Yagi, a man who remembered what Izuku's touch could do. And here we go, Izuku muttered under his breath, pulse steadying as the armed and drones closed in. The alarms wailed. Steel shutters sealed the glass walls. Red lights strobed across the gala as guests screamed, stumbling over gowns and chairs. A towering villain's face flickered onto the giant screens lining the hall, scarred, mask pulled low. His voice was a gravelly snarl. Ladies and gentlemen, remain calm. This island is ours. Every hero, every invention, every secret. You belong to us now. Gasps erupted through the crowd. Pro-heroes stiffened, but when they reached for their comms, nothing responded. Security jammers engaged. The villain sneered from the screen. Try to resist and these drones will tear you apart. As if on cue, the armed machines descended lower, mechanical limbs clicking. All Might stepped forward, his cape catching the red light, face hard. Not while I'm here. The crowd surged with desperate relief. All Might's here. Izuku's heart clenched at the sight of him. The same towering figure he'd once begged an answer from, the same man who now looked at him like a walking danger. And then All Might moved. In a blur of speed and raw power, he tore through the first wave of drones, fists shattering steel like paper, explosions of sparks lighting the gala. His voice boomed across the chaos. Fear not, for I am here. The crowd roared, but Izuku felt something hollow in the sound. Because for all the cheers, the whispers still followed him. Exodus is here too. What happens if he loses control? Maybe the villains came for him. Beside him, Hikari's eyes glowed faint green, her grip steadying his gloved hand. Melissa's face had gone tight, but her gaze was already darting, calculating exits, systems, vulnerabilities. All Might can't do this alone, he muttered under his breath. We'll have to move. The gala floor was chaos. Heroes blocked by disabled comms, civilians herded by drones, and All Might smashing through metal like thunder. Melissa grabbed Izuku's sleeve, her voice quick but urgent. I know where the control systems are. If we can get there, I can override the lockdown and free the heroes. Izuku blinked at her. Control room? Melissa nodded, her face pale but steady. North Tower, underground level. Dad gave me access weeks ago. Hikari tightened her grip on Izuku's gloved hand, eyes glowing faint green. Then we move. Staying here means getting boxed in. They ducked through the panicked crowd, slipping past overturned tables and drones focused on the larger threats. Izuku's heart pounded, but his training kicked in, noting every angle, every opening, every pattern in the drone's sweeps. Melissa led them through a side door into a dim, sterile hallway. The moment it shut behind them, the noise of the gala dulled, leaving only the buzz of fluorescent lights. Izuku exhaled hard, running a hand down his suit. All right. Just us now. Melissa glanced at him, then at Hikari, who still hadn't let go of his hand. We'll need to be fast. Once the system recognizes we're in, it'll trigger failsafes. And the villains won't ignore us if they catch on. Izuku nodded. His mother's quirk thrummed faintly in his fingertips. Pens and screws from a maintenance cart rattled toward him. He flexed his glove, steadying himself. Then we don't get caught. Hikari smirked faintly, her voice dry. Guess all that sparrings against robots are about to pay off. Melissa pushed open the next door, revealing a stairwell that spiraled down into the bowels of the tower. She glanced back at them. Ready? Izuku's jaw tightened. Born ready. Melissa's badge beeped against the scanner, and the heavy door clicked open. The dim stairwell stretched downward, humming faintly with the vibration of the tower's hidden machinery. Izuku stepped inside first, scanning the shadows, his gloves creaking as his fists clenched. We're clear. For now. Hikari followed close, eyes glowing faint green in the low light. She glanced back at Melissa. You sure this path gets us there? Melissa adjusted her glasses, holding her tablet tight. Positive. I know the service tunnels better than anyone. If we keep to maintenance corridors, we can slip past patrol routes. Izuku's mouth tightened. And if we don't? Melissa swallowed but didn't hesitate. Then we fight. The three of them descended into the stairwell, their footsteps echoing against concrete and steel. The further down they went, the louder the hum of machinery grew, and with it, the weight of what they were walking into. For Izuku, the whispers from the gala still clung to him. Exodus. Monster. Dangerous. He flexed his fingers in his gloves, shaking the thoughts away. No, not tonight. Tonight I prove them wrong. At the landing, Hikari stopped, eyes narrowing as she caught a flicker of movement at the bottom of the stairs. We've got company. Izuku's muscles tensed, his pulse steadying. Then we move quiet. Fast. Melissa took a shaky breath but nodded. Together. Their footsteps echoed down the concrete stairwell, until shadows shifted below them. Two villains in black combat gear stepped out from the landing, weapons glinting under the red emergency lights. Guests off limits, one sneered, baton crackling with static. Orders are to keep strays contained. The other grinned. Or put down. Izuku and Hikari froze for half a breath. No capture gear, no multi-tool, just the clothes on their backs. Melissa sucked in a sharp breath behind them. Then Izuku moved. He lunged down the stairs, catching the first villain's arm before the baton could swing. He twisted, dragging the man off balance, and slammed him into the railing. The second rushed him, but Hikari stepped forward, eyes glowing faint green. The aura pulsed faintly, and his footing faltered as if his body forgot how to respond cleanly to his quirk. It was enough for Izuku to drive a knee into his gut and shove him down hard onto the steps. It was messy, brutal, and quick. No polish, just instinct. The two men groaned, dazed but still alive. Izuku stood over them, chest heaving. He could leave them. Move on. That would be the hero thing. But the whispers from the gala still rang in his head. Exodus. Dangerous. Monster. Izuku's jaw tightened. If I'm already the monster, then I'll use it. He ripped off one glove and pressed his palm to the first villain's neck. The man spasmed, a strangled gasp escaping as energy surged. Izuku staggered as memories slammed into his head in a flood. A briefing room. A masked leader snarling orders. Schematics of the Expo security hub. The objective, seize David Shield's invention. Fallback orders, kill any resistance. Izuku's hand trembled, but he pulled away before the man collapsed completely. His breath came hard and ragged. The villain slumped to the floor, alive but unconscious, the glow of his quirk now thrumming faintly inside Izuku's veins. The second man scrambled back, eyes wide, but Izuku moved faster. His other glove hit the floor. He grabbed the villain's wrist, forcing his palm against bare skin. Energy jolted like fire through his arm. His vision split into flashes of thought not his own. Explosives wired in the service tunnels. Timers set to trigger if the mission failed. The rallying cry of loyalty, a name repeated in fevered devotion. Wolfman. Izuku gasped, teeth gritted as the power seared into him. When he let go, the man hit the ground with a heavy thud, twitching but breathing. Both would be out for hours, maybe longer. Izuku swayed, chest rising and falling, his hands trembling from the surge of stolen energy. Two quirks simmered inside him, volatile but under control. For now. His eyes narrowed. He had their memories, their plans, their powers. He wasn't just fighting anymore, he was carrying their weapons against them. If this is what it takes, he muttered under his breath, then I'll use every piece of it. Melissa stared pale. You just... Izuku yanked the glove back on, his voice low, steady, and terrifyingly calm. Now I know why they're here. Hikari's sharp eyes locked on him. She'd seen him absorb quirks before. But this? Watching him pull everything, memories, purpose, orders, from an enemy with a touch? Even she felt the chill of what he really was. But when Izuku turned to them, green eyes blazing with focus, he wasn't shaken. We don't have time. Let's move. Izuku pulled in a long breath, his head still spinning with stolen memories. But underneath that haze, there was power. Faint, raw, already fading, but there. He looked down at his gloved hands, flexing them. Electric charge. And reflex boosting. Melissa blinked, stunned. You copied them? No. Izuku cut her off, voice rough but controlled. Borrowed. It won't last. The second villain groaned, rolling to his side. Instinct fired through Izuku. He darted forward, his body moving sharper, faster than it should have, and drove his fist into the wall just above the man's head. Electricity snapped across his knuckles, crackling along the concrete. The villain slumped unconscious. Melissa stumbled back a step, her breath catching. The glow in Izuku's eyes, the way the villain slumped unconscious at his feet, it was overwhelming. Fear prickled at her spine, but so did something else she couldn't deny, awe. Izuku tugged his glove back on, chest still heaving. His voice was low, rough. That's what they'll call it. The real me. A monster. And if being that monster keeps you both safe, then fine. Melissa shook her head quickly, words spilling before she could stop them. No. That's not the truth. You can be dangerous, Izuku, anyone with power can. But that doesn't make you a monster. She hesitated, her voice softening, almost slipping past her control. Your quirk isn't a curse. It's a blessing. Because you're the one holding it. The words hung in the air, heavier than she meant. Melissa's cheeks flushed faintly, but she didn't take them back. Izuku's eyes widened slightly, startled, but before he could speak, Hikari stepped closer, sliding her hand firmly into his gloved one. Her green-gold eyes burned with unshakable defiance. Let them say what they want. They don't get to define you. You're not their monster. You're mine. And I'll never let them twist that. Izuku's lips trembled, but then a faint, shaky smile broke through. Melissa looked away, pressing her glasses up to hide the heat in her face. But when her eyes flicked back, they carried nothing but belief, not just in what he could do but in who he was. Hikari caught the flush, the softness in Melissa's tone, and the way her gaze lingered. Just like she'd caught the laugh in the plaza, the smile over the scanner, the way Melissa looked at him during introductions. She didn't call it out. Not now. But the mental note etched itself deep, filed alongside every other sign she'd picked up all day. Izuku squeezed Hikari's hand tighter, grounding himself. His voice was steadier now. Come on. We've got a control room to reach. The three of them moved together into the shadows of the stairwell. Izuku carrying the weight, Hikari ready to shield him, and Melissa quietly, unshakably believing in the boy the world insisted on calling Exodus. The stairwell opened into a vast, echoing chamber. At the far end, glowing behind reinforced glass, sat the control hub. Red alerts blinked across every screen. Between them and salvation stood an army of drones. Rows upon rows, lenses burning crimson, weapons humming with charge. Melissa's breath hitched. That's the entire security detail. Izuku stepped forward, bare hands flexing. His gloves were already tucked away, no barrier between him and the world now. He turned his head just enough to speak over his shoulder. You two run. Get to the hub. Melissa shook her head. Izuku. Go. His voice was flat, hard. A soldier's voice, not a boy's. If I fall here, at least it buys you time. If you fall, it's over. Hikari's eyes burned faint green, her fists clenching. You don't get to. He cut her off, jaw set. Trust me. The first volley screamed through the air. Izuku ripped off both gloves and surged forward. Energy blasts hammered into his chest and shoulders. His body rocked, but shock absorption swallowed the force, spreading it harmlessly. A bolt seared across his ribs. Regeneration stung like fire as the flesh knitted shut. Another drone lunged. Izuku's stolen reflex boost kicked in, the world slowing around him for a heartbeat. He sidestepped cleanly, ripped the metal baton from its grip, and swung in one seamless motion, sparks flying as the machine crumpled. The swarm pressed closer. Dozens, then more, a tide of glowing red eyes. Izuku thrust out his hand. Screws, bolts, and stripped wires ripped from the walls, whirling into orbit around him. His mother's useless quirk turned every scrap of the battlefield into shrapnel. Another blast streaked toward him. He raised the baton and electricity crackled along its shaft, surging from his palm. He spun it in a wide arc, discharging the current in a snap that fried 3 drones at once. The baton glowed faintly, humming like a live wire in his grip. Melissa yanked on Hikari's arm. We can't waste this. Hikari's eyes stayed locked on Izuku. His silhouette cut through the smoke and sparks like something unreal, reflex quick, storm-charged, shrapnel orbiting him like a crown. For a second she almost forgot to breathe. Then she tore her gaze away and ran with Melissa. Behind them, the chamber became chaos. Izuku didn't dodge. He didn't retreat. He absorbed, letting shock absorption swallow volleys, regeneration stitch wounds shut, reflex boost sharpen his counters. He slammed the electrified baton into another drone, fried its circuits, then hurled it into the swarm with impossible precision. His mother's quirk dragged screws and wires free, whips of steel tearing joints apart. The baton cracked, sparked, hummed like thunder. Electricity arced with every strike, scattering drones and bursts of light. Melissa's badge beeped against the final lock, the hub hissing open. She sprinted to the console, fingers flying, but her eyes kept darting to the glass. Izuku wasn't just fighting. He was enduring. A storm of borrowed quirks and scraps, holding a line no one else could. Hikari pressed to the glass, her glow steady, her voice low and fierce. That's why they'll never cage him. That's why I'll never let them. Melissa's breath caught. Izuku Midoriya was dangerous, undeniably so, but not in the way the world whispered. Dangerous like a wildfire, impossible to smother. Dangerous in a way that demanded belief. She forced her hands back to the keys. Then I'd better hurry, because if he keeps this up too long. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Izuku didn't look toward them. Didn't call for help. He just fought, electricity sparking, reflexes blurring, shrapnel screaming through the air. A storm in human form, declaring one truth with every strike. The last line of code slid across Melissa's screen, and the alarm shifted pitch. Lock override complete, the system intoned. She sagged against the console, breath rushing out. I did it. Hikari didn't answer, she was still at the glass. Melissa turned slowly, following her gaze. Izuku stood at the center of the ruined chamber. Smoke curled from shattered drones. Bolts and metal scraps littered the floor in heaps. He was panting, sweat dripping down his jaw, suit torn and scorched, but already regeneration was smoothing over burns and sealing bruises. Half of his upper body's clothes were torn and the other half was caked in his blood. Shock absorption had dulled the worst of it. His mother's quirk still hummed faintly at his fingertips, screws orbiting lazily before clattering to the ground. The temporary quirks were still strong in his body and his body hadn't buckled. Melissa's throat went dry. He fought a small army. Alone. And he's still standing. The glass door hissed open, and Hikari rushed to his side, sliding under his arm just enough to steady him. You're insane, she muttered, but her hands lingered, steady, proud. Izuku's chest heaved, but his eyes stayed sharp. Told you I'd hold them. Melissa's hands clenched into fists. You didn't just hold them, Izuku. You tore through them like, she cut herself off, shaking her head. Never mind. We need to move. This isn't over. Izuku nodded, pulling his glove back on, tightening the strap with steady fingers despite the tremor in them. He wasn't unscathed. He wasn't untouchable. But he was fine. More than fine. And as the three of them regrouped to follow the cannon beats, sneaking toward the tower's upper floors, toward David's shield and the real hostage standoff, the whispers of the gala still clung to Izuku's mind. Exodus. Monster. Dangerous. He exhaled, jaw set. Call me what you want. I'm still here. Still fighting. The elevators had been cut, so they climbed. Melissa's map guided them through steel stairwells and service tunnels until the tower loomed above, its glass and steel glittering with red emergency lights. Inside, the hostages sat bound, David Shield among them, guarded by Wolfram's men. All Might, forced to hold back by their weapons, stood tense and silent, eyes never leaving the criminals. But what none of them saw was the trio slipping into the upper levels. Melissa tapped her tablet nervously, whispering, "We're above the main hall. If I can cut power to the jammer, the heroes outside can respond again." Izuku crouched by the vent, scanning the enemy positions. His gloves were back on, but the memory of that storm of drones clung to him like a second skin. Hikari leaned against him lightly, her glow pulsing faint green. "You look like you're about to jump in alone again." "If I have to," Izuku muttered. She smirked faintly, sharp but warm. "Then I'll just have to be faster." Melissa smiled weakly, the moment grounding her before the tension snapped. And snap it did. The villains spotted them as they breached the control balcony. Guns swung up. Shouts rang out. Melissa ducked behind cover. Izuku and Hikari didn't. Together they moved, Izuku ripping small screws and plates from railings to jam barrels, Hikari dampening quirks in her radius, the two of them a seamless rhythm of suppression and precision. But then Wolfram stepped forward, metal bending and surging around his arms, his quirk magnified by hidden tech. His gaze swept over the scene, and locked onto Izuku. "So the rumors are true," Wolfram sneered. "The monster child who kills with a touch." Izuku's stomach clenched. For a heartbeat he saw the gala crowd whispering. The police file stamped dangerous. Bakugo's furious face. But then Hikari's hand brushed his sleeve, steady and sure. He exhaled slowly, jaw tightening. "Call me whatever you want. I'm not the one chaining people to the floor." The floor shuddered as Wolfram's metal surged, wrapping into jagged blades around his arms. His grin was sharp and cruel. "You're no hero," he spat at Izuku, voice echoing through the chamber. "You're proof the system breeds monsters." Izuku didn't flinch. He stepped forward, slipping one glove off, electricity still faint in his veins from his last absorption. "Funny. That's exactly what I think when I look at you." With a roar, Wolfram thrust out his arms. The floor ripped open, metal shards screaming toward them. Hikari's glow pulsed green, her aura dampening the edge of Wolfram's amplification. The blades shuddered, slower, weaker, just enough for Izuku to dive through. He hit the ground rolling, his mother's quirk snapping loose bolts and scraps from the scaffolding, whipping them into the blades midair. Sparks exploded as the storm of metal collided. Wolfram snarled. "Cheap tricks." Izuku was already moving, barreling in close. Shock absorption let him crash straight through the debris. He slammed a fist, buzzing faintly with stolen charge, into Wolfram's chest plate. The villain staggered, armor denting. But Wolfram recovered instantly, his quirk dragging the very walls down around them. Hikari darted in, fists tight, her aura flaring brighter as she stripped more of his quirk's potency. "Move, Izuku." He ripped free just as steel spears impaled the floor where he'd stood. Melissa shouted from behind cover, fingers flying across her tablet. "Almost there, just a few more seconds and I can release the hostages." David Shield, bound at the center, lifted his head at the sound of tearing metal. His breath caught. Melissa was at his side, struggling with the restraints, her sapphire dress torn at the sleeve. And beyond her, the boy. Izuku stood bloodied but unbowed, electricity sparking across his arms, reflexes turning him into a blur against the villain's storm of steel. Every blow he took was met with another step forward, every wound sealed almost as quickly as it came. For a moment, David forgot to breathe. He'd seen this boy's file, the cold report stamped with words like volatile and containment necessary. He had signed off on projects meant to keep this power under lock and key. But what he saw now wasn't a monster. It was a boy, battered, desperate, and still fighting. Fighting for him. Guilt knifed through David's chest, sharp and sudden. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to be the one protecting his daughter, protecting the future. Instead, a child the world feared was standing between him and death. Melissa's voice broke through his thoughts, urgent, trembling. "Dad, don't just stare, help me with this." David swallowed hard, forcing his hands to move on the restraints even as his eyes lingered on Izuku. Bloodied, defiant, carrying more than he should. "Midoriya." David whispered, the name catching in his throat. For the first time he didn't see a weapon. He saw a boy carrying the weight the adults had been too afraid to bear. Wolfram snarled again, summoning a tidal wave of metal. Izuku braced, body trembling, ready to burn every quirk he had left just to stand. And then, boom. The wall shattered inward. All Might. Melissa cried, relief and terror in her voice. The symbol of peace strode in, cape billowing, his voice a thunderclap. That's enough. The room stilled for a heartbeat as Wolfram faltered. Izuku staggered back, chest heaving, eyes locked on All Might's towering frame. He didn't look relieved. He didn't look saved. He just looked sharp. Watching. Measuring. Because if Wolfram had called him a monster, All Might's silence in that moment almost agreed. All Might surged forward, the ground trembling beneath his steps. Wolfram's steel tide clashed against him, but the symbol of peace drove through it with raw force. Fist met fortress, shockwaves ripping through the chamber. For a moment, it looked like the fight was already won. Heroes restored. Villains doomed. But then Wolfram's body shimmered, the hidden amplifier thrumming across his frame. The steel around him thickened, spread, multiplied into grotesque tendrils of metal lashing across the hall. David Shield's voice cracked as he pushed Melissa behind him. No. He's using my prototype, the quirk amplifier. It magnifies power exponentially. He's stronger than current All Might now. Izuku froze, eyes wide. A quirk amplifier? David Shield just froze as fear pressed in, just as sharp as a sick feeling to his stomach. The amplifier, Wolfman's stolen prize, was fully being integrated into the villain's body. Yet for now it was external, vulnerable. If Izuku's quirk could pull screws from machines and rip weapons apart, if he could absorb quirks from living flesh, what would stop him from seizing the amplifier itself? From taking its power into himself? David's breath stuttered. If that happened, there was no telling what Midoriya would become. Savior? Or the weapon the world already branded him as. On the field, All Might strained, his muscles trembling as steel bound around him like chains. His smile flickered, his voice hoarse. Not enough. Izuku's fists clenched. His breath burned in his lungs. Every instinct screamed to run forward, and Hikari was already moving, her aura flaring green as she shouted, All Might, hold on. Izuku tore after her, David's warning ringing behind him. Wait, if you fight him, that amplifier. But they didn't stop. They couldn't. Hikari's aura pressed down on Wolfram's metal, dampening its strength just enough to slow the thrashing tendrils. Sparks shrieked as steel scraped against invisible pressure. Izuku crouched low, gloved hands sweeping across the floor. A handful of loose screws and shards rattled, tugged free by his mother's quirk. He lunged, baton in one hand, fragments spinning in the other, and skidded to a stop in front of All Might. His chest heaved, green eyes blazing with something that burned hotter than fear. All Might, he said, voice sharp and certain, we can't do this alone. Not you. Not me. We do this together. For the first time since the fight began, All Might hesitated. He'd been ready to throw himself forward, to burn what little he had left in one final push, but the boy stood there, bloodied and defiant, not asking for protection, not trying to prove himself, but calling him to stand side by side. All Might's gaze flicked to Hikari, her aura still holding the worst of the steel at bay, then back to Izuku, and for the first time he nodded. Together then, he rumbled, squaring his stance. His grin broke through, weary but fierce. Let's show them what we've got, young Midoriya. Izuku's lips twitched into the faintest smile before he turned back toward Wolfram, baton sparking in his grip. Right. Wolfram's roar shook the chamber as steel tendrils lashed in all directions, tearing through walls and floor. The air reeked of ozone and smoke, every strike heavy enough to pulverize stone. All Might darted forward first, cape whipping as he planted his feet and drove a punch into a wall of metal. The shockwave splintered it, but more tendrils rose instantly, wrapping around his arm and shoulder. His teeth clenched as he forced them back. He's multiplying the density. It's like punching reinforced concrete. Hikari slid in low, her aura flaring green gold around her fists. Then stopped trying to smash it all at once. She slammed her hands into the floor, her quirk rippling out. The steel slowed, its lashing arcs dragging as though they moved through water. Now, she barked. Izuku darted between them, baton sparking with stolen electricity, reflexes firing in bursts that kept him half a step ahead of the strikes. His mother's quirk tugged loose scraps from the walls and floor, screws, bolts, fragments of plating, tiny bits that he whipped at Wolfram's joints, each impact forcing the villain to redirect. But the opening was still too narrow. A massive tendril whipped toward him, sharp as a blade. All Might wrenched his trapped arm free with a roar, slamming both fists into the strike and knocking it just off course. Sparks flew as the tip carved across the floor instead of Izuku's chest. Midoriya. All Might's voice thundered. Your move. Hikari's aura flared brighter, pressing down with every ounce of her strength. The coils around Wolfram shuddered, slowed, staggered. For a second the steel didn't lash, it strained. "That's it," she snarled. "Go." Izuku's green eyes burned. He darted forward, scraps spinning, baton glowing with crackling arcs. Every step was carved by the effort of the two beside him. All Might smashing aside the heavy blows, Hikari pressing the storm to stillness. And in that heartbeat of space they gave him, Izuku found his opening. His gloves were gone. His chest heaved. Every scar and bruise already burning away under regeneration. He sprinted. The storm closed behind him, but he didn't flinch. He dove straight through the wreckage, hands bare, and clamped down on Wolfram's arm. The villain's scream ripped through the night as energy bled into Izuku's body. Memories. Power. The amplifier's raw distortion flooding his veins. But Wolfram's rage was endless. He thrashed, metal spiking in every direction, and the floor beneath him gave way. The world lurched. "Izuku!" Hikari screamed, reaching out as the balcony collapsed. Steel and concrete tore free, and boy and villain tumbled into open air, locked together in the fall. Wolfram's amplified quirk writhed wildly, thrashing to tear Izuku apart. Izuku's grip only tightened, his eyes blazing, refusing to let go. Far above, All Might staggered to the edge, his voice a broken roar. "Midoriya!" The world blurred into freefall, shards of steel, broken glass, and the night sky rushing past. Izuku's hand stayed locked on Wolfram's arm, knuckles white, nails digging in. He wasn't just clinging for survival, he was taking. The flood poured into him. Metal manipulation snapped through his nerves, the amplifier's distortion sparking under his skin. His blood burned, his muscles screamed, but he refused to let go. And then the memories came. A sterile office, curtains drawn. A towering figure in shadow, voice dripping with false kindness. "Wolfram, you have ambition. I can give you the strength to match it." Wolfram kneeling, desperate, nodding as All for One's hand rested heavy on his shoulder. "All it will cost you is loyalty." Blueprints of the amplifier, laid across a table with surgical precision. Horrors in glass tanks, flesh warped, eyes glazed, implanted with stolen quirks. The first Nomo. The very ones unleashed at the USJ. All for One's voice again, coaxing, patient, poisonous. "The world needs monsters to remind it of its fear. You will not fail me." Izuku's breath tore ragged from his lungs. His eyes widened, the weight of the truth crashing down. All for One, he made the Nomo. Even back then at the USJ. And he used you. Wolfram's body jolted, rage flaring across his face. "Shut your mouth." The steel storm around him faltered for just a heartbeat. Then it surged back, stronger, as the device fused deeper into his flesh. His voice cracked with fury. "You think you can steal from me and win? I still have more." Izuku's scream tore through the night as their bodies slammed against the tower, scaffolding splintering under the impact. The collision ripped them apart, flinging Izuku onto a twisted platform while Wolfram crashed lower, rebounding in a rain of debris. Izuku staggered upright, chest heaving, eyes wide. Around him, the steel beams rattled faintly, bending toward his outstretched hand. Wolfman quirk was now permanently in BJ's body. His heartbeat pulsed with the amplifier's rhythm. He had it, a piece of it. Permanent. But below, Wolfram rose too. His armor reformed around him, metal crawling across his skin. His veins glowed red-hot with the amplifier's power. His voice boomed, still thunderous, still defiant. "You didn't take enough, boy. I'm not broken yet. I'll tear you apart and feed your corpse to the sea." Izuku braced on the railing, jaw clenched, his voice steady despite the tremor in his limbs. "Then come and try." High above, All Might gripped the edge of the broken tower, eyes flicking from Izuku's clash below to the groaning beams overhead. The metal was buckling, whole supports sagging under Wolfram's rampage. If it collapsed, it wouldn't just bury them, it would bring the entire expo floor down with it. For a heartbeat, his face paled. He had seen villains rise, seen Nomu born of cruelty, but this, Midoriya standing bloodied, power still climbing, Wolfram raging unchecked with the amplifier twisting his flesh. He couldn't tell which was worse. Then the scaffolding screamed, steel bending, bolts snapping loose. Dust rained down in choking waves. Hikari's scream cut through the chaos, raw and unguarded. "Izuku." All Might turned, jaw set. "The tower won't hold. If it goes, everyone here dies." Hikari's eyes blazed, torn between the cracking supports above and Izuku staggering against Wolfram below. All Might grabbed her shoulder, voice firm but urgent. "Take David and Melissa. Get them out of here. That's an order. Her jaw clenched, teeth bared. I'm not leaving him. You're not abandoning him. All Might barked, shaking the beams free of debris with one mighty blow. You're saving lives. Let me hold the tower. You get them clear. His eyes cut back to Izuku, still refusing to yield. His voice softened just a fraction. He'll buy us the time. Trust him. Ikari's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to run back to Izuku, to stand at his side until the end. But the tower groaned again, a whole section folding in on itself. David was already shouting, shielding Melissa with his body. She cursed under her breath, aura flaring as she dashed to their side. Fine. But if he falls before I get back. Her glare burned like fire. All Might's grin cracked wide even as sweat streaked his face. He won't. He's Midoriya Izuku. And with that, the symbol of peace vaulted upward, bracing the collapsing beams with both arms, muscles straining as the tower screamed around him. For the first time, Izuku stood alone against Wolfram, dust swirling like ash, the weight of the fight solely on his shoulders. His breath came in ragged pulls, baton trembling in his grip. Blood streaked his face, his body screaming from the strain of too many quirks at once. And then, something inside him shifted. Beneath it all, his body thrummed with the steady pulse of the amplifier. His strength, his reflexes, his control, his quirks, all sharpened. His eyes snapped open, glowing in eerie, vivid green that lit the dust around him. The screws and shards in his orbit whipped faster, tighter, each movement unnaturally precise. Wolfram flinched, rage flashing into unease. How are you? Izuku didn't answer. He wasn't even fully aware. The glow dimmed as he blinked hard, sucking in a breath like he'd been drowning. He yanked his glove off, grounding himself, forcing the storm in his veins to settle. But the damage was done. Wolfram had seen it. Shock absorption coiled in his muscles, ready to drink in the impact of every blow. Regeneration flared in his veins, burning like fire but knitting every tear before it could linger. His mother quirk pulling in the small rubble to his hands as he breathed in. Reflex boost surged through his nerves, sharpening his movements to a predator's edge. Electricity sparked across his knuckles, each strike charged with violent arcs of power. And now Wolfram's own quirk, metal manipulation, bent with his pull, screws and shards orbiting in a jagged storm as their wills clashed. Wolfram rose from the rubble, his veins glowing red-hot, steel armor reknitting itself into jagged plates. His amplifier screamed with raw power, feeding him beyond human limits. They locked eyes. You can't handle it, Wolfram spat, his voice ragged but thunderous. You're just a child playing God. That power will rip you apart. Izuku's jaw clenched. His voice was low, steady, terrifying in its certainty. Then I'll let it. He moved first. Steel beams shot from the floor, Wolfram's control twisting them into spears. Izuku countered with his mother's pull, ripping bolts and scraps into a storm of shrapnel that slammed into the spears midair, shattering them into sparks. The villain swung a steel pillar the size of a bus. Izuku didn't dodge. He caught it chest first, shock absorption dulling the crushing impact, his regeneration snapping bones back into place even as he roared and shoved it aside. Then he lunged forward, his own metal manipulation dragging beams from the walls, forming jagged claws that slammed into Wolfram's armor. The villain staggered, snarling. You thief. Izuku's eyes blazed. Survivor. Wolfram's roar split the air as the tower groaned around them, steel writhing like a living beast. He hurled a column the size of a tree, the amplifier's glow pulsing with each lash of metal. Izuku didn't flinch. He dropped low, baton sparking with stolen electricity as he darted forward, reflex boost snapping his movements sharp and clean. Sparks danced as he slammed the baton into the column's base, cracking it apart before it could crush him. The fragments speared toward his chest, but shock absorption drank in the impact, his frame trembling as the force bled harmlessly through his muscles. He shoved the shards aside and pressed forward, closing the gap. Wolfram snarled, tearing fresh beams from the walls. They writhed around him like whips, slashing at Izuku from every angle. A lash clipped his shoulder, burning through cloth and skin. Regeneration stung like fire as it knitted the wound shut even as he moved. Izuku's fist lit with electricity. He slammed it into the nearest whip, current flooding the metal. Sparks erupted down its length, forcing Wolfram to recoil as the feedback snapped against his arms. You brat. Wolfram spat, metal lashing harder, faster. Izuku's green eyes blazed, catching the rhythm, the flaws. Reflex boost sharpened his focus, his body weaving through the gaps as the debris shifted under his pull. Screws, bolts, shattered plating. His mother's quirk ripped them free, orbiting him in a storm that shredded Wolfram's strikes before they landed. And then he reached deeper. His hand thrust out while clashing with Wolfram's own. For a heartbeat, the steel between them froze, caught in a tug-of-war that rattled the chamber. Sparks screamed from the amplifier. Izuku snarled, voice raw but steady. "You don't own this power." The beam bent, and then it snapped, twisting under Izuku's command, slamming back toward Wolfram with brutal force. Step by step he advanced. Electricity cracked across his baton. Shock absorption fueled every strike. Reflex boost carried him through impossible openings. His mother's pull stripped the battlefield bare, turning debris into weapons. And Wolfram's own quirk bent under his hands, the storm turning against its master. Wolfram staggered, eyes wide. For the first time his steel faltered. The amplifier blazed brighter, desperate, but it wasn't enough. Izuku's chest heaved, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You wanted me to be the monster?" The orbiting storm of steel and sparks howled louder, crowning him in jagged firelight. "Then fight me." For the first time Wolfram looked shaken. Because the boy he called a monster was fighting like one, and winning. Wolfram's scream rattled the air as Izuku slammed him into the bent steel platform, debris orbiting them like a storm. The villain's armor cracked, sparks bleeding from the gaps as Izuku's hand clamped on his chest. Power surged. The amplifier in Izuku's veins thrummed, his mother's quirk pulled every loose shard into his orbit, shock absorption braced him against Wolfram's thrashing blows, and regeneration stitched every wound closed before blood could fall. Even Wolfram's own metal manipulation bent under Izuku's pull, twisting, betraying its master. The storm of steel froze, caught between them. Izuku pressed harder, breath ragged, his voice a growl. As the metal coiled around Wolfman, pressing him down. "It's over. I can end this. I should end you right now." Wolfram's eyes widened, panic flickering under the amplifier's glow. For the first time he looked less like a conqueror and more like prey. And then, a voice cut through the storm. "Izuku. Hikari." She stumbled across the wreckage, bruised but unbroken, her aura glowing faint green as it pressed down on Wolfram's power. Her eyes locked on Izuku's bare hand. On his trembling jaw. "Don't," she said, breathless but fierce. "You've already won. Don't finish him off." Izuku's grip tightened. Wolfram thrashed, steel screaming as it bent around them. The pulse of power in his veins urged him on. Just a little more, just one push, and it ends forever. But Hikari's voice broke through again, steady despite the fear. "You're not a monster. You're my best friend. My partner. You're the boy who still wants to save everyone." Izuku froze, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his brow. His eyes flicked from Wolfram's terrified face to Hikari's steady gaze. And slowly, with a ragged exhale, he let go. Wolfram collapsed, his amplifier sputtering, his armor cracking apart. The villain was beaten but alive. The debris around Izuku fell still, bolts and shards clattering to the ground. His shoulders shook, exhaustion and adrenaline finally crashing over him. Hikari reached him, her hand brushing his arm, her aura already active. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved us." Izuku didn't answer, not with words. He just let her steady him as the storm inside finally quieted. But neither of them noticed the faint red glow above. A battered broadcast drone hovered, lens locked on Izuku since the fight began. It had caught every second, the storm of steel, his bare hands on Wolfram the moment he nearly went too far, and the choice to stop. Across the island, across the world, millions were already watching. From a distance, All Might stood in the wreckage of the tower, his chest tight, his face pale. He'd seen Izuku fight like no other student, but also teeter on the edge of something else entirely. And that edge terrified him more than Wolfram ever could. Island, 2 days later. The news cycle hadn't stopped. Every channel replayed the footage from my island. The drone shot of the collapsing tower, the chaos of civilians fleeing, the raw frame where Izuku Midoriya stood at the center of a storm of steel. Girders bent and twisted around him like living serpents, the amplified energy in his veins flaring bright. And then, the freeze frame. His bare hand pressed to Wolfram's chest, the world holding its breath at the line between restraint and execution. The captions varied depending on the network. Young hero saves hundreds from collapse. Is this the next symbol of peace, or symbol of fear? Wolfram defeated. Who is the boy of steel? Teen with lethal quirk nearly kills villain. Too much power for a child? It wasn't just Japan. American anchors compared him to All Might's early years. European commentators debated quirk regulation, citing Izuku as proof that unstable powers in young hands could be catastrophic. In Africa, clips of him were already remixed with music, his silhouette crowned in steel beams, a rising symbol. While in South America, footage of him surrounded by steel beams already carried a dozen nicknames online: Iron Fist, Metal Heart, the Boy Titan. Yet the one name stood above them all to no one's surprise was Exodus. Commentators speculated endlessly. Exodus, Deliverer or Destroyer? One American anchor asked, voice sharp over a split screen of the fight. If this boy had gone one step further, Wolfram would be dead. That's not heroism. That's execution. Others countered. Exodus held back. That restraint is exactly why he is the kind of hero this world needs. Some voices praised him as a savior, the boy who succeeded where even All Might faltered, who saved the expo and everyone inside. Others whispered threat. A villain in training. A weapon walking in human skin. A child with a quirk that could end lives too easily. Savior. Threat. Messiah. Monster. Exodus. And Izuku felt it all pressing down on him. He sat on the edge of the bed, gloves tugged tight, staring at the muted broadcast on the wall screen. The drone's red eye pulsed in his thoughts on repeat, a heartbeat of judgment. His chest ached like the metal itself had pressed inward, crushing. His fingers twitched, and the lamp beside the bed rattled. The screws in the chair legs buzzed faintly, straining. The metal yield was still there, under his skin, waiting. Wolfram's quirk. His quirk now. The enhanced reflexes and electricity has been left his system the same night when it all went down. Beneath all of it, deeper still, thrummed the steady hum of the amplifier, that dangerous reservoir inside him that sharpened what he already had. Strength. Awareness. Control. It magnified to the point of breaking. Enough to win. Enough to terrify. His breath hitched. Is this who I am now? A knock came at the door. Izuku? You in there? Hikari's voice. He pulled himself up and opened the door. She stood there grinning, hands hidden behind her back. Her aura faintly flickered at the edges, not defensive, just calm. For him. You look like you've been chewing glass, she teased, stepping past him into the room. She dropped a small bag onto the desk and turned back to him, her eyes softening. You don't have to think about that today. Izuku blinked, confused. What do you mean? She smirked, leaning closer. It's your birthday, dummy. He froze, eyes widening. I forgot. Well, I didn't. She pulled the first surprise from the bag, a small box, neatly wrapped, landing in his hands before he could protest. And that's just the start. I've got a whole plan, so don't even try to sulk your way out of it. Izuku stared at the box, his chest tight for a completely different reason now. Hikari, you didn't have to. Of course I did, she cut in. Her voice softened, playful edges dipping into something steadier. Because no matter what the world says, you're still you. And you deserve at least one day where you feel like it. His throat caught. For the first time in days he smiled, small, shaky but real. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said with a grin, tugging him by the sleeve toward the table. This is surprise number one. And trust me, I saved the best for last. Izuku turned the small wrapped box over in his hands. His gloves creaked against the paper before he carefully peeled it open. Inside was a simple charm bracelet. The cord was green, worn but freshly cleaned, and dangling from it was a tiny pendant shaped like a bento box. Izuku's breath caught. This was. Hikari nodded gently. Your mom's. I asked around. My dad and mom helped me find it in the lost items database from the old storage transfers. I thought, you should have something of hers again. His fingers trembled as he held it, memories rising unbidden. His mom humming in the kitchen, nudging him to eat, reminding him he was stronger than he thought. His eyes stung, but this time he didn't fight it. Thank you, he whispered, voice hoarse. Hikari smiled, touching his sleeve softly. That's surprise number one. And you've got a whole day of them, so don't think you're getting away with just crying in a hotel room. Izuku actually laughed. A quiet, broken thing but real. Hikari practically dragged Izuku out of the hotel, ignoring his nervous glances at people whispering as they walked past. The expo streets were still buzzing with life, neon lights flickering above rows of food stalls, steam curling from sizzling griddles, and the smell of fried dough and roasted meat pulling at every corner. Wait, we're eating here? Izuku blinked, bewildered. Not a restaurant? Hikari grinned, tugging him toward a stand where skewers hissed over open flames. Restaurants are overrated. Heroes can have their fancy galas, we get real food. Soon they were balancing trays of skewers, dumplings, and noodle cups, finding a spot on the curb beneath a glowing paper lantern. Hikari plopped down first, stretching her legs out like she owned the street, then patted the spot beside her. Izuku lowered himself carefully, half expecting someone to call him out. But no one did. Just people walking by, too busy with their own food and chatter. For once, he wasn't the center of attention. He bit into a skewer cautiously, then widened his eyes at the burst of flavor. "This is, wow. Told you," Hikari said, leaning in close, smirking. "Way better than anything you'd order with a tablecloth and silverware." Izuku laughed, short, startled, but real. "You're ridiculous." "Maybe." She nudged him with her elbow, grinning. "But you're smiling. So it's working." They ate like that for a while, trading bites, arguing over which vendor smelled better, and daring each other to try the weirdest-looking things on the menu. At one point, Hikari shoved a fried octopus ball at him. "I don't know." Izuku eyed it nervously. "Birthday rules," Hikari said firmly, waving it under his nose. With an exaggerated sigh, he took a bite, and instantly coughed at the heat. Hikari burst out laughing, nearly dropping her noodles. Izuku laughed too, even through the steam burning his tongue. It felt normal. Not like a boy who'd nearly leveled half a tower. Not like the kid on every news broadcast. Just two teenagers sharing greasy food and bad jokes under the glow of street lights. Izuku leaned back after a while, patting his stomach. "Okay. I think I'm actually full." "Impossible," Hikari declared, already digging into another dumpling. "But I'll allow it since it's your birthday." Izuku shook his head, smiling softly as he watched her. "I can't remember the last time I did something like this. Just sat outside eating junk food, laughing." Hikari's teasing smirk softened into something warmer. "Then you were overdue." For a moment, with the hum of voices and the scent of fried batter drifting through the air, Izuku let himself believe it. That today at least he could just be a regular teenager. As the sun began to dip, Hikari led him down to the quiet stretch of beach on the expo's edge. The sand glowed orange in the fading light, waves lapping gently. "You're not serious," Izuku said, eyeing the open stretch of sand. "Training doesn't stop just because it's your birthday," she teased, dropping into a stance. Her aura shimmered faintly, suppressing quirks around her, safe ground for him. "Besides, I owe you a rematch." He hesitated, tugging his gloves tight. "You're sure?" "Positive." She smirked. "Unless you're scared I'll win." That did it. Izuku dropped into a stance and the spar began. It wasn't brutal, not like their training back at UA, but it was sharp, alive. Sand kicked up as they moved, testing reflexes, trading blows. Hikari's eyes burned with quiet determination, and Izuku's movements flowed freer than they had in weeks. Between strikes, Hikari's voice cut in, almost casual. "Hey, do you remember the first thing we ever did together?" Izuku blinked, dodging a quick jab before answering. "Our first spar. Back at UA. You came at me like you were testing if I was worth your time." She grinned, twisting on her heel to catch his arm. "And you actually lasted longer than I thought you would. That's when I figured, maybe you'd stick around." Izuku's chest tightened, but in a good way. "Guess I did." For a moment their movements slowed, the memory softening the fight. Then she caught his wrist barehanded, her quirk dampening his. He froze, then realized she wasn't flinching. "You don't have to be afraid all the time," she said softly, before spinning him into the sand with a grin. He lay there, blinking up at the sunset, then laughed again, small, unguarded, but real. "Happy birthday," she said, offering him a hand up. Back at the hotel, the lights were dim, and Melissa was waiting in the lounge with a grin. On the table sat a small cake, frosting lopsided, writing clumsy but heartfelt. "Happy birthday, Izuku." Izuku froze, his throat tight. I haven't had one since." His voice cracked, the words breaking off before he could finish. Melissa gave his shoulder a squeeze, smiling gently. "Then you were overdue." Hikari struck a match, lighting the candles, their glow reflecting in her green-gold eyes. "Make a wish." Izuku stared at the flickering flames. For a long moment he couldn't breathe. Then silently, "I wish I can keep saving people. Even me." He blew them out, the smoke curling upward. Hikari clapped like it was the most important thing in the world. Before Izuku could say anything, Melissa tapped a remote, and the lounge's wall screen flickered on. Izuku's eyes widened as familiar faces appeared in the windowed call. Shinso, Mei Aizawa, and Ms. Joke, each crammed into the teacher's lounge back at UA. "Happy birthday, problem child," Aizawa said dryly, lifting what looked like a mug of coffee in lazy salute. "Don't mind him," Ms. Joke laughed, leaning into the frame. We all wanted to be here. Consider this the next best thing. And when you come back, you're joining our annual beach trip before summer camp starts. Non-negotiable. Aizawa gave a faint shrug. Beach trip. Don't make me regret it. Izuku actually laughed, small, raw but real. Mei nearly toppled into the camera. Forget the beach, check this out. Surprise tech drop. Hikari pulled a small box from under the table and handed it over. Inside, Izuku found sleek gloves with hidden clasps. They retract into wristbands, Mei explained proudly. Combat ready, support ready. Life ready, boom. Izuku slipped one on, his mouth parting in awe. Mei, this is amazing. Da, she grinned. And you'll test them for me, right? Before he could answer, Shinso leaned into the feed, smirking. My turn. You've had enough serious gifts, so, comics. He held up a stack of Marvel and Batman volumes before panning down to reveal a replica Batman utility belt. Hikari handed Izuku another wrapped box and sure enough, inside was the belt itself. Shinso's grin widened. I won't be surprised if you end up making a real one. You're basically halfway there already. Izuku barked a laugh. You're such a nerd. Coming from you? Shinso fired back. Melissa slid a final case toward him, her fingers a little unsteady. Inside rested a vial of shimmering silver liquid, swirling like mercury. It's a stabilized liquid metal, she explained. Responsive to your quirk's magnetic field. You can shape it, weapons, shields, tools, whatever you need. Think of it as an extension of your will. Izuku's breath caught as he held the vial up to the light. Melissa, this is incredible. I don't even know how to thank you. Melissa flushed, warmth flooding her cheeks at the earnestness in his voice. She ducked her head, fumbling with her glasses. On the screen, Ms. Joke's grin sharpened as she cut her eyes toward Hikari, who was watching the exchange a little too intently. Oh, someone's not the only one flustered tonight. Hikari quickly looked away, pretending to fuss with the cake knife. Shinso snorted, arms crossed. Izuku's still so dense he doesn't even notice. Some things never change. Everyone chuckled, and Izuku blinked in confusion, glancing between them. Oh, what? Nothing, Ms. Joke sang, waving him off with a laugh. For a moment, the lounge was filled with warmth, teasing, laughter, and the kind of noise that meant family. Izuku felt his chest loosen as he looked between them all. Mei's wild grin, Shinso's smirk, Ms. Joke's playful spark, Aizawa's reluctant nod, Melissa's pink cheeks, and Hikari's smile as she sees Izuku having a good time. He swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. You guys, thank you. Really? Hikari leaned in with a grin, whispering just for him, don't thank me yet. The best surprise is still waiting. Izuku's heart stuttered in his chest. For the first time that week, the weight of the world lifted, even if just for one night. The hotel room was quiet, lit only by the city's glow spilling through the curtains. Izuku sat cross-legged on the bed, the bracelet from his mother still looped around his wrist, the taste of cake still lingering on his tongue. Hikari stood in the doorway, fidgeting with something in her hands. When she stepped closer, he saw it, a black box, velvet and neat. She held it out with a shy smile. One last surprise. Then I'm officially out of ideas. Izuku blinked, taking the box carefully. His fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside lay a necklace, sleek, simple but powerful. The pendant was shaped like a tooth, silver-edged, its design reminiscent of Black Panther's necklace. It's basically Black Panther's necklace he'd be wearing. It glinted faintly under the light. His breath caught. This is... Hikari cut in, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. Mei, Melissa and I worked on it together. Special. It's basically unbreakable. As long as you wear it, you can touch me, skin to skin, without me having to keep my quirk on. Izuku's eyes went wide, his throat tight. You're serious? She nodded, her grin crooked but tender. Serious. No more hesitating. No more flinching. Just us. His hands shook as he lifted the pendant, the weight of it more than just metal. This is the best gift I've ever been given. Hikari leaned closer, her voice a whisper now, a promise in every word. Then wear it. Never take it off, for me, please. Izuku slipped it over his head. The cool weight settled against his chest. For a moment he just stared at her, then he reached out, fingertips brushing her hand. No spark of danger. No need for her quirk. Just touch. Tears began to flow from his eyes, and before he could say anything, Hikari stepped in, pressing her forehead against his. Happy birthday, Izuku. He closed his eyes, clutching the pendant, whispering back, best birthday ever. But as she pulled him into a soft kiss, Hikari's thoughts burned quieter than her smile. And now you're safe. Even from them. She would never tell him that the necklace was also proofed against the government's weapon. The energy beam meant to strip, nullify, maybe even kill him. He didn't need that weight. Not tonight. Tonight he just needed to feel human. And she was going to make it happen tonight. She wanted it to happen tonight, but only if he wanted to. Izuku's tears slowed, though his hands still clung to hers as though letting go would make the moment vanish. His breathing evened out, shaky but steadier, and when he lifted his head, his eyes were red but shining. Hikari studied him, the necklace gleaming faintly against his chest. A lifetime of walls and scars sat in his posture, and yet, tonight she could see him lowering them piece by piece. Izuku, she said softly, her thumb brushing the back of his hand. I want more with you, but only if you're ready. Only if it's what you want. Silence stretched, heavy and uncertain. For a long moment he just stared at her, his throat bobbing, the weight of the necklace like a second heartbeat against his chest. At first he shook his head, not in refusal but in fear. I don't know if I can. You don't have to, she whispered quickly, leaning closer. Not tonight. Not ever if you don't want to. But his hand didn't pull away. Slowly, almost timidly, his fingers curled tighter around hers. His hesitation didn't vanish, but it softened, his breathing matching hers as if finding rhythm together. Izuku swallowed hard, eyes wet again but steady now. I want to try. Hikari's chest stuttered. Relief, guilt, and something fragile and dangerous all at once. She leaned in, their foreheads brushing again, and this time his hand rose, hesitant, trembling, to her cheek. His touch was clumsy, awkward, but it was real. Izuku could finally feel free to be a normal person with someone he truly cared for. Her lips hovered a breath away from his. Then, slowly, carefully they closed the distance. The kiss was shaky, damp with the last of his tears, but it deepened when neither pulled back. Their hands tightened, their bodies leaning closer, the space between them vanishing. When they finally broke apart, they didn't move far. Her forehead pressed to his hand still on her cheek, both of them trembling but unwilling to let go. The room felt different now, charged with something unspoken, undeniable. Izuku's heart pounded, but for once it wasn't from fear. It was from wanting. The curtains shifted with the city breeze, the world outside moving on. But here, in this small corner of borrowed time, Izuku Midoriya and Hikari allowed themselves something more than survival. Tonight they weren't soldiers or survivors. Tonight they were just two teenagers discovering what it meant to choose each other. The next morning, island departure. The lobby of the airport buzzed with travelers, journalists, and expo staff, the air heavy with chatter. But for Izuku and Hikari, the noise felt far away. Izuku walked with his bag slung over his shoulder, the necklace glinting faintly against his chest. His smile hadn't faded since last night, that goofy, almost dazed grin that made it obvious he was replaying every moment in his head. Every glance at Hikari only made it worse. And Hikari, she practically glowed. Her steps were lighter, her hair a little more undone than usual, her cheeks pink in a way that had nothing to do with nerves. When Izuku's hand brushed hers, she didn't hesitate. Their fingers laced and stayed there, easy and natural, like something that had been waiting to happen all along. People are staring, she whispered, her lips twitching at the corners. Izuku ducked his head, but his dopey grin betrayed him. Let them. Hikari nudged his shoulder, trying to mask her blush, but the softness in her eyes made it clear she didn't really mind. As they reached the boarding area, Melissa intercepted them. She smiled, but it was tight, her posture too steady to be casual. She let her gaze flick once between them, Hikari glowing, Izuku grinning like a fool, and then carefully she took Hikari's arm, pulling her just a step aside. Her voice dropped, low and controlled. So, last night? Hikari froze, her ears scarlet. Melissa? Melissa's lips quirked in the faintest smirk, but her eyes stayed flat, guarded. Thought so. A beat passed, and then her tone sharpened, the teasing gone. And you still didn't tell him, did you? Hikari's smile slipped. No. He doesn't need that on his shoulders right now. He's already carrying enough. Melissa's gaze shifted to Izuku, still waiting in line, absently fiddling with the necklace, smiling to himself. Her expression didn't change, but her words cut quietly. When he finds out that thing is shielding him from my father's nullifier prototype, and that you kept it from him, he's going to flip. Hikari's glow dimmed for a moment, her jaw tightening. Maybe. But at least he'll be alive to be mad at me. Melissa studied her, unreadable, before letting go of her arm and stepping back into place. The mask slipped back into a smile. Well, guess this is it. Before Izuku could respond, Melissa moved in and hugged him. Not quick, not polite, but deep, firm and lingering. For a second she held him too tightly, her eyes closing, her breath catching in a way she couldn't quite hide. Izuku blinked at first, then melted into the embrace, smiling warmly. Thanks, Melissa. Really. For everything. Melissa pulled back slowly, her hands staying on his shoulders a moment longer than they should have. Her face was calm, but guilt weighed behind her eyes and something else, something she'd never say aloud. Take care of yourself, Izuku. I will, he said with that same dopey grin, blissfully unaware. Melissa nodded, but as she released him, Hikari's eyes narrowed just slightly. She'd noticed the hesitation, the too long hold, the flicker of softness Melissa had tried to bury. For a heartbeat, their gazes met, Hikari's steady, Melissa's unreadable. Then Melissa looked away, slipping the mask back on. Her hug with Hikari was brief and firm, almost perfunctory. Safe travels, you two, she said evenly. Hand in hand, Izuku and Hikari walked toward the boarding tunnel, glowing from the night before, carrying secrets heavier than their luggage. Melissa stayed behind, arms folding, her calm smile never wavering. But inside, guilt twisted like a knife. Somewhere between loyalty, fear, and the mask she'd worn too long, she had realized something she would never admit. She had feelings for Izuku Midoriya. Feelings Hikari had already recognized, and Melissa would never confess. UA faculty conference room, late evening. The room was dim but tense, the projector humming faintly as stills from My Island lit the screen. Izuku with glowing eyes, steel orbiting him in a storm, Wolfram pinned beneath his hand. Beneath the images, headlines scrolled endlessly. Exodus, savior or threat? Quirk thief or hero? Is Yue harboring a villain? Nizu sat at the head of the table, paws folded neatly. Thank you all for staying late. We need to discuss the Midoriya situation before the board and the press make it for us. Present were Aizawa, All Might, Midnight, Present Mike, Cementos, Vlad King, Snipe, Ectoplasm and Recovery Girl. The weight in the room was palpable. All Might stood by the window, shoulders squared but heavy. David's shield confirmed it. The amplifier wasn't fully bonded to Wolfram. Midoriya absorbed it. Entirely. He now carries a modular power-boosting device in his system, and that's on top of the quirks he already holds. Shock absorption. Regeneration. Metal manipulation. Temporary enhancements. He's accumulating. All Might's silence stretched, heavy as stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. I fought beside him. Surprised me, how controlled, how focused he was. But that control doesn't erase what he is. He is dangerous. The words hung. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. And there it is. You won't say you're afraid, but we can see it. The boy fought with control. He fought with you. And you still look at him like he's a loaded gun pointed at your chest. All Might didn't deny it. Midnight exhaled slowly, her arms crossed. And the world saw every second of it. He's not just a student anymore. He's a symbol, whether we like it or not. Present Mike tapped the table, uncharacteristically serious. And not the kind of symbol people agree on. Half the crowd wants to crown him, half wants him in a cage. You should have heard the airport today. Shoyuta nearly had a riot on his hands. Aizawa slouched in his chair, scarf draped loose, eyes flat. Protesters. Zealots. Both sides screaming louder than the other. Some calling him the next All for One, others calling him their savior. I had to erase a few just to clear a path to the car. That's not going away. Cementos shifted uneasily. Public opinion's a battlefield we can't build walls around. The students feel it. The staff feels it. And the government. Nizu's ears twitched. Yes, the government. Recovery Girl's voice was sharper than usual. They want to experiment on him again, don't they? Nizu nodded gravely. Their request was framed as safety testing, determining if Midoriya is controllable. In truth, they're maneuvering toward a legal angle. Snipe let out a low curse. Vlad King's fists clenched against the table. Midnight's lips curled. So they're going to bury him in red tape until they can justify a cage. That's their plan, said a voice in asking in the room. Ms. Joke strolled in, her usual playful smile dimmed but not gone. Sorry I'm late. The lawyers love to talk circles, and I can only laugh through so many depositions before I start throwing pies. A few tired smirks flickered around the table, but the weight of the meeting remained. She dropped a folder on the table, flipping it open to reveal a neat stack of legal documents. Here's the update. The government is moving hard to reclassify Midoriya's vigilante incidents as criminal activity. They want him on record as a danger, which would justify mandatory testing and containment. In other words, they're trying to make him a legal guinea pig. Midnight swore under her breath. Samantha's hand tightened into a fist. Ms. Joke leaned back, crossing her arms. But the UA legal team already filed counter motions. Strong ones. We've got precedent and we've got the press. If they try to drag him into a courtroom, they'll look like they're punishing a child hero who saved Island. Nisa's eyes gleamed. Optics matter almost as much as law. Exactly, Joke said. And right now optics are in our favor. But, she jabbed a finger at the papers. This is going to be a long fight. Appeals, hearings, motions. They'll try to wait us out until Midoriya slips up in public and gives them more ammunition. All Might shifted by the window, face grim. And if he does? Then we double down, Joke said simply. We bury them in paperwork until they choke. That's all we can do right now. The room got quiet as the weight of the situation. Nizu broke the silence. Shoyuta, you and Emi mentioned a plan? Yes. Aizawa's voice was steady. The beach. A week away, quiet, forgotten. Not just for his birthday but to get him out of the public eye before training camp. Right now he can't step outside without a mob forming. He needs to remember he's a 16-year-old boy, not a headline. Present Mike nodded quickly. Yeah. Kid needs to breathe before the system chokes him. Recovery girl's gaze softened. And to heal. Body and spirit. He's been cut open more than anyone his age should bear. Midnight tilted her head. And when he comes back? Aizawa's jaw tightened yet before he could say anything Ms. Joke spoke in a serious tone. Then we face it. The press. The government. The board. But not so close to his birthday. If he knows they're trying to charge him, he'll carry it like it's already his sentence. He'll break himself in half trying to prove them wrong. All Might's frown deepened. And hiding him will solve that? No, Aizawa replied. But it'll remind him he's Midoriya Izuku. A kid. Not a weapon. Not a monster. Just a boy who deserves a damn birthday weekend without reporters clawing at him. Nizu's eyes gleamed, sharp and calculating. So we shield him. Let MJ and the law team keep fighting the charges. Keep him out of it until the battle is unavoidable. Cementos finally spoke, his voice a steady rumble. Then we build walls here. Around him. Around the students. Around UA. Until the storm passes or we're ready to meet it. The room fell quiet again. On the screen, Izuku's image froze mid-battle, glowing eyes, shrapnel orbiting him like a crown, infamous and famous in the same breath. Nizu leaned back in his chair, tail flicking once. Then it settled. Midoriya gets his week. His birthday. His beach. One brief reminder that he is still Izuku. After that, the world will have its say. And we will be ready to answer. Highway outside Mizudafu, late night. The hum of the engine was the only sound for a while, the glow of city lights fading in the rear view as Shota steered them back toward home. Emi leaned against the passenger window, scarf loose around her neck, the faintest exhaustion tugging at her eyes. Finally, she broke the silence. So, the beach, huh? Annual Aizawa getaway, just with one more stray cat added to the mix. Shota grunted. He needs it. Both of them do. Too many cameras, too many whispers. If we leave them here, Midoriya will burn out before he ever gets a chance to breathe. Emi's smile tilted wryly. And here I thought you didn't do birthdays. I don't, he muttered, eyes on the road. But he's not just another student anymore. None of this is normal. Treating it like it is would be worse than ignoring it. For a moment, the car filled with quiet again. Emi traced a finger absently across the foggy glass, drawing little arcs of light. Then softly. You saw it too, didn't you? The way they looked. Like they were lit up from the inside. Shota's hands tightened just slightly on the wheel. Yeah, I saw it. They tried to hide it, she went on, voice hushed. The way they're looking at each other, longer contact, pretending like nothing is happening. Yet it's something. Her brow furrowed, playful lilt replaced by concern. It's like they're sleeping together. Shota's jaw worked. They couldn't have. Not with his quirk. And Hikari's not reckless enough to gamble her life like that. Exactly. Emi shifted, turning to face him fully, her usual smile nowhere to be found. So what was it? Because unless I'm going crazy, they're definitely sleeping together. Shota kept his eyes fixed on the highway, the streetlights flashing across his face. I don't know. His voice was low, almost reluctant. And I want to ask but I'm not sure. The two of them are walking a knife's edge already, and if they're not sleeping with each other and it's something else. The silence stretched, heavy, thoughtful. until Emmy suddenly clapped her hands together. And we'll need to shop when we get there. Food, sunscreen, umbrellas, swimsuits. Shota groaned, dragging one hand down his face. Why did I agree to this trip again? Emmy grinned, eyes sparkling. Because deep down you love me and you know the kids need it. Shota muttered under his breath, but he didn't deny it as he had a small smile on his face. The next day, Izuku found himself standing awkwardly in front of a rack of swim trunks while Ms. Joke darted around like a whirlwind, holding up shirts, hats, and sandals. These? No, too plain. This? Too loud. Oh, these are cute. She shoved a pair of green trunks into his arms. Try them on. Izuku sputtered. Wait. Hikari leaned against the display, smirking. Better listen to her. She won't stop until you do. I've never, Izuku muttered, cheeks burning as he shuffled toward the fitting rooms. When he came out, tugging nervously at the waistband of the green trunks, Hikari tilted her head, studying him with mock seriousness. Not bad, she said, lips twitching upward. You clean up better than I expected. Izuku turned even redder. Why, you're just saying that. Am I? She teased, leaning in close enough to make his pulse spike. Ms. Joke beamed, hands on her hips. Perfect. He's officially beach ready. Now all we need is sunscreen, snacks, and maybe an umbrella. Aizawa, carrying 3 bags already, deadpanned, or maybe less stuff. Hikari nudged Izuku's shoulder as they left the store. See? Not so bad. You'll thank us when you're not wearing long sleeves in the sand. Izuku tugged at the strap of the shopping bag, a shy smile creeping onto his face. Maybe I already do. Beach getaway, boardwalk. The boardwalk stretched long and crowded, gulls wheeling overhead as the scent of fried food drifted through the air. Izuku walked between the Aizawas, covered as always in long sleeves and a loose hoodie despite the summer sun. The only skin showing were his hands, and one of them was firmly linked with Hikari's. He still glanced down now and then like he couldn't believe it was real, but her grip stayed steady, casual even. She swung their hands slightly as they walked, teasing him every time he tried to pull back. Stop looking at it like it's going to explode, she whispered with a grin. It's just me. Izuku blushed, muttering something under his breath, but he didn't let go. That's when Ms. Joke spotted the sunglasses shop. Oh, Izuku, you are not walking around here squinting like a lost puppy. Sunglasses now. She swooped in, catching his free arm, and tugged him inside before he could protest. Ms. Joke, really? I'm fine? Nope. Don't argue with style. The bell above the shop door jingled shut, leaving Hikari and her father outside. Aizawa's eyes lingered on her hand, still hanging in the air where Izuku's had been. His voice came quiet, flat, but sharp. You were holding him barehanded. And your quirk wasn't active. Hikari's grin faded. She let her arm drop, her expression softening but firm. Yeah. How? She glanced at the shop window where Izuku tried on oversized shades, Ms. Joke beaming beside him. Then she looked back at her father, her tone calm but edged with steel. He's safe now. That's all that matters. Aizawa studied her, unreadable. Safe from what? Her grip on her sleeve tightened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she repeated, quieter but just as fierce. I'll protect him. Always. For a long moment, the waves and boardwalk chatter filled the silence. Then Aizawa finally nodded, slow and tired, as if he recognized a line he couldn't press further. Not yet. Inside, Izuku laughed nervously as Ms. Joke shoved a pair of round, bug-eyed sunglasses on his face. Through the window, Hikari smiled faintly, lifting her hand as if to catch his again once he came back out. And Izuku, catching her gaze, relaxed for the first time all day. At the beach, midday. The sand was warm underfoot, the waves rolling in lazy arcs. Most of the boardwalk crowd stayed clustered far down the shore, leaving a quiet stretch just for the Aizawa family. Izuku stood at the water's edge, tugging awkwardly at the hem of his hoodie. Hikari nudged him with her shoulder, already barefoot and grinning. Come on. You can't wear that in the ocean. He hesitated, glancing around. But there's no one here but us, she cut in, softer now. You're safe. With me. Her hand slipped into his, warm and steady. Izuku exhaled, then finally peeled off his hoodie and shirt, revealing the lean, scar-lined muscle he'd built since joining UA. The sun lit his skin, his necklace gleaming faintly at his collarbone. Hikari grinned. See? Not so scary. She tugged him into the waves, and for once he didn't resist. They laughed as the water splashed up around them, Hikari diving under a wave and popping up just to splash him again. Izuku retaliated with a clumsy spray, and for a moment, the heaviness of the world fell away. From the shore, Ms. Joke rested under an umbrella, watching them with an amused smile. Beside her, Aizawa's arms were crossed, his gaze fixed on the two in the water. He's letting her hold his hand. Bear, Aizawa muttered. Ms. Joke tilted her head, smirking. And teenagers hold hands, Shota. It's adorable. Her quirk wasn't active, he said flatly. That wiped the smirk from her face. She sat up, following his gaze more carefully now. Wait, you're sure? Yes. His tone was quiet but tight. And when I asked, she wouldn't explain. Just said he was safe now. Ms. Joke frowned, biting her lip. That doesn't sound like her being reckless. That sounds like her hiding something. Aizawa didn't answer, but his jaw tightened as he watched Izuku lift Hikari easily out of a wave, both of them laughing. For a moment, they looked like any other pair of kids, carefree in the summer sun. But Aizawa knew better. And the knot in his chest told him this was only the beginning. Beach, afternoon. The waves had calmed, and the heat of the sun was mellowing into the golden haze of late day. Izuku and Aizawa had wandered off toward the food stalls on the boardwalk, leaving Ms. Joke and Hikari sprawled on their towels under the shade of an umbrella. Ms. Joke stretched, pulling her hair back into a messy bun. She glanced at her daughter, who was watching the shoreline where Izuku had disappeared. So, Ms. Joke began, voice lilting with mischief. Want to tell me why your dad's convinced you're hiding something about that boy? Hikari stiffened, then slowly exhaled. Because I am. Ms. Joke turned on her side, resting her head in her hand. That's not the answer I expected you to actually admit out loud. Hikari tugged her knees to her chest, her hair falling forward. He's safe now. That's all that matters. There was no joking tone in her voice. It was firm, protective, and heavy for a girl her age. Ms. Joke's smile softened. That sounds like a lot of weight you're carrying for him. Hikari was quiet for a moment, then whispered, How do you know if you love someone? The question hung there, vulnerable in the sea air. Ms. Joke blinked, then gave a slow, crooked grin. When you do something stupid for them without thinking twice. When you'd rather get hurt yourself than see them suffer. When their smile feels like it makes your whole day better. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. And from the way you've been holding that boy's hand all day like the world might try to take him away from you? Honey, I think you already know the answer. Hikari's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. She hugged her knees tighter. I'll protect him. No matter what. Even if he never understands why. Ms. Joke reached over and ruffled her daughter's hair gently. That's love. Messy, inconvenient, and worth it. Just don't forget, protecting him doesn't mean keeping everyone in dark forever, especially from him. That's where your dad's worry is coming from. Hikari didn't answer, but her eyes stayed fixed on the path where Izuku would come back, determination and something softer flickering in her gaze. Evening, beachfront. The sun was dipping low, painting the waves in orange and violet. They'd packed up most of their things, the boardwalk food still warm in takeout boxes stacked by the towels. Izuku sat a little apart from the others, knees drawn up, necklace glinting faintly in the fading light. Aizawa and Ms. Joke exchanged a glance before Aizawa finally walked over, crouching down beside him. You've been quiet, Aizawa said. Izuku gave a small, humorless laugh. That's kind of normal for me, isn't it? He hesitated, fingers tightening against his knees. Then he exhaled, voice low. I know you and Ms. Joke are suspicious. About Hikari. About how she can touch me without her quirk. Something happened there at Island. I know she's hiding something from me and I don't know what, but I know. Aizawa's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. Izuku's gaze stayed on the water, his voice steady but soft. I don't care. I trust her with my life. She's the only person who's ever made me feel like I wasn't cursed. Like I wasn't dangerous. His throat tightened, but he kept going. Sometimes I think she's the only thing keeping me from going off the deep end. The silence after that was heavy. Aizawa studied Izuku with his usual sharpness, but there was no judgment in his tone when he finally spoke. You sound like you already know what that means. Izuku looked down at his gloved hands, then toward Hikari, who was gathering the last of their things, hair catching the sunset. His chest eased just a little. Yeah, he whispered. I do. Aizawa's scarf rustled faintly as he stood, his expression unreadable. Then don't waste it, Midoriya. He walked back to the others, leaving Izuku alone with the waves, the weight of his words, and the girl who had become his anchor. Nightfall, on the beach. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving only the afterglow and the sound of waves. The boardwalk noise was far behind them now. Here it was just the sand, the surf, and the salty breeze. Izuku sat on the sand, knees pulled up, staring at the ocean with his thoughts still tangled. Then he felt a shadow fall across him. Hikari plopped down right into his lap, looping her arms casually around his neck. Izuku sputtered, face going red. Hikari? What are you? She smirked, tilting her head. Carry me around the beach. He blinked. What? Come on, she teased, voice soft but sure. You carried the weight of Island, Anomu and Wolfram. You can carry me. Izuku huffed a laugh despite himself, his hands hesitating before settling carefully against her waist. You're ridiculous. Maybe. But you're smiling, she shot back, the same words she'd used during their birthday food run. For a moment they just sat there like that, her weight warm against him, the ocean breeze tugging at her hair. This. Izuku's voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the surf. This is great. I didn't think I'd ever have something like this. Hikari leaned back just enough to look at him, her eyes glowing faintly green-gold in the dim light. Me either. But I don't want to let it go. Izuku's breath caught. His heart pounded in his chest like it was trying to break free. Are you saying? I'm saying, Hikari interrupted gently, her voice suddenly soft, that I love you, Midoriya Izuku. For a second he froze, the words slamming into him harder than any battle. But then his lips curved, shaky, overwhelmed but real. I love you too, Hikari. Her grin widened, but her eyes softened as she leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. Good. Took you long enough. They kissed, unhurried, quiet, the waves crashing behind them like applause. For the first time in years, Izuku didn't feel like a weapon or a curse or a boy waiting to break. He just felt loved. The waves crashed soft and steady, the moonlight turning the water silver. Izuku's arm was still around Hikari, the warmth of her pressed against him making his pulse race faster than any fight. For a long beat they just sat there listening to the tide. Then Izuku cleared his throat, face burning. What if, he started, voice almost swallowed by the surf, we, snuck off somewhere. You know, just us. No umbrellas, no chaperones. Just, the beach. Hikari blinked at him, then smirked. Wow. Midoriya, Izuku suggesting something reckless? Didn't think you had it in you. Izuku managed a crooked grin, cheeks hot. Guess you give me courage. She laughed, soft and disbelieving, bumping her forehead against his. You're ridiculous. Probably, he admitted, still smiling. But I'd be ridiculous with you anywhere. Hikari tilted her head, mischief sparking in her eyes. If you're serious about sneaking off, then let's make it more fun. Izuku blinked. More fun. She leaned close, her lips brushing his ear. First the beach, then maybe the ocean. Izuku nearly choked, his whole face going crimson. Tch, the ocean. Hikari? Her laugh bubbled out, bright and teasing. What? Surprised? You talk big about being reckless, but I didn't think you'd actually picture it. I wasn't. He stopped, catching the challenge in her grin, and for once let the fluster burn into determination. His mouth quirked into a nervous but steady smile. You make me picture it. That silenced her just long enough for the tide to roll in and out again. Then she swatted his chest lightly, cheeks flushing even as her grin lingered. You're impossible. Maybe, Izuku said softly. But I'm yours. Before she could fire back, he bent and swept her off her feet, cradling her against his chest. Hikari let out a startled yelp that turned into laughter. Izuku. He started toward the darker stretch of sand at the edge of the cove, heart hammering but steps sure. You said sneak off, right? Then let's have some privacy. Her arms looped around his neck as the waves echoed behind them, the two of them disappearing into the quieter shadows of the beach. At Airbnb, late night. The door eased open and two sets of footsteps padded across the wood floor. Izuku's hoodie was half-zipped, sand still clinging stubbornly to his hair. Hikari followed close, cheeks flushed, her fingers brushing his before she shoved them into her pockets. On the couch, Ms. Joke and Aizawa were waiting. Neither spoke at first. Late night walk. Ms. Joke asked lightly, though her eyes were sharper than her tone. Izuku froze. Hikari gave a small shrug. Something like that. Aizawa's arms were crossed, scarf draped loose but his stare unblinking. You're both terrible liars. The silence stretched until Ms. Joke leaned forward, folding her hands. Look, I don't need the details. But I do need to know you understand what you're doing. Choices like this don't go away in the morning. Hikari's jaw tightened. We know. It's not like that. Izuku nodded quickly, voice low but steady. I'd never take advantage of her. Ever. That softened Ms. Joke's expression a fraction, though her tone stayed firm. Then you'll respect each other enough to remember what comes with it. Aizawa cut in, voice flat and cold. And you'll remember she's my daughter. If you want to keep walking this path together, fine. But you'd better be ready to take responsibility for any and everything. You need to be safe while you're doing this as well. Do you understand? Both teens nodded, cheeks burning. For a moment it seemed over, until Ms. Joke's eyes caught the faint gleam at Izuku's collarbone. That necklace. It's the only thing that's different that would allows for y'all to touch with no quirk. Don't tell me May had nothing to do with it. Aizawa leaned forward instantly, eyes narrowing. Does it work for everyone? Hikari's head snapped up. No. The word came too fast, too sharp. She steadied herself, then added quickly, I've been telling people I've mastered my quirk. That I can keep it running subtly, always on. That's why I can touch him. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. So you've been lying. Hikari met his stare without flinching. Yes. Because no one else needs to know the truth. Ms. Joke tilted her head, lips quirking into the faintest smile. Smart. A simple lie people can believe is safer than a complicated truth they'd rip apart. Aizawa's glare slid to her, unimpressed, but she lifted a shoulder. What? She's covering her bases. That's my girl. Where did it come from? How? Aizawa pressed, his voice low and dangerous. Hikari folded her arms, jaw set. I'm not telling you. Don't test me, Aizawa started, but Izuku stepped in, voice steady but protective. It was Melissa's shield, he said. Both adults turned to him. Melissa and May helped build it, using Hikari's quirk as the base. That's why it only works between us. Aizawa's gaze snapped back to Hikari, his tone sharp. You let your quirk out into someone else's lab? Izuku cut him off quickly. Only Melissa and May. No one else. And Hikari made sure to erase everything after. No records. No samples. It's gone. Hikari nodded firmly. He's right. They're the only ones who ever had access, and I shut it down the second it was finished. The room went quiet. Finally, Ms. Joke exhaled, rubbing her temple. So 2 people you trust and it's already wiped. That's something at least. Aizawa leaned back slowly, arms crossed again. If this leaks, the government won't stop until they have you in chains and you in a lab. We know, Hikari said softly. Ms. Joke sighed, waving them toward the hall. All right. Enough for tonight. Go clean up, get some rest. Tomorrow's supposed to be fun, not a tribunal. Izuku and Hikari slipped toward their room. She whispered just loud enough for him to hear, told you they'd press us. Izuku groaned, face redder than the sunset had been, but her hand brushed his and he didn't pull away. They had barely shut the door when Aizawa's voice cut down the hall, cold and flat. Don't get comfortable. I'm doing bed checks in 10. Izuku stiffened, blood running cold. He muttered under his breath, I'm dead. Hikari smirked despite herself, nudging his shoulder. Relax, hero. You've survived worse. Besides, her grin turned teasing, I warned you. Izuku buried his face in his hands, groaning softly, while Hikari laughed under her breath, already giving him a goodnight kiss. Aizawa's promise of bed checks wasn't idle. The very next morning, Izuku woke to 3 sharp knocks and the flat command of, Midoriya. Bed check. He scrambled to the door, half-dressed, mumbling a nervous greeting. Across the hall, Hikari opened her door with her hair a complete mess, glaring at her father. Seriously? It's dawn. That's when bed checks happen, Aizawa replied without a shred of humor before shuffling away with his scarf draped around his shoulders. Breakfast in the Airbnb was only slightly less awkward. Ms. Joke cooked pancakes in a sunflower apron, humming cheerfully while Hikari stole bites off the plate. Izuku quietly washed dishes until Ms. Joke swatted his hands away and shoved a plate at him. Aizawa sat at the end of the table with his coffee, eyes half-lidded. Fun, he muttered when Ms. Joke announced the day's plans. She rolled her eyes. Translation, he's thrilled. The next few days blurred into something almost normal. They hit the boardwalk first. Izuku was dragged into carnival games and, after overanalyzing the angle of every throw, actually won a stuffed toy. Ms. Joke cheered so loudly that he nearly bolted, only for Hikari to smugly cheat with her quirk to win him a tacky green keychain. Better prize, she teased. Izuku's ears turned red, but he kept it. The beach day came next. Hikari challenged him to a swim race, which ended in a chaotic water fight. Ms. Joke dove in and beat them both, flexing like she'd won Olympic gold. Aizawa, true to Hikari's prediction, sat under an umbrella the whole time, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, grumbling every time sand got too close to him. When Izuku cut his foot on a shell, the whole outing paused while Hikari fussed over him. Mizuku wrapped it carefully and Aizawa muttered, "Always trouble," though his eyes lingered longer than usual to make sure the boy was fine. On their third day they wandered through a seaside market. Mizuku bought armfuls of trinkets while Aizawa ended up carrying all the bags. Hikari teased Izuku into buying matching bracelets, laughing when he turned scarlet. Later they stopped to listen to a street musician, and Izuku stood still, quiet and thoughtful, until Hikari slipped her hand into his and he relaxed. That night, fireworks bloomed over the water. They spread blankets on the sand, boxes of street food stacked between them. Mizuku sighed happily with her head tilted to the sky. Hikari leaned into Izuku's shoulder, and though he stiffened at first, he didn't move away. Aizawa sat a little apart, scarf hiding most of his face, but he didn't complain. For a few days it felt like a real family trip. Awkward mornings, noisy afternoons, warm nights. Izuku almost forgot the wait waiting for him back home. Almost. The vacation rhythm lasted only a few days before duty came knocking again. Early one morning, Aizawa's phone buzzed with a secure line. He answered with his usual curt tone, then passed the device to Mizuku, whose smile faded into something more professional. "Great timing," she muttered, already pulling on her jacket. Izuku blinked from the kitchen table, half a pancake left on his plate. "Something wrong?" "Nothing you need to worry about," Mizuku said quickly, though her eyes flicked toward Aizawa. "Faculty call-in. Secure site in town. We'll be gone most of the day." Aizawa downed the rest of his coffee and stood, scarf already looped around his neck. "Stay here. Don't draw attention. Don't do anything stupid." "Yes, sir," Izuku said automatically, though his heart was already thudding with the thought of rare privacy. The moment the front door closed behind them, Hikari shot Izuku a sideways look. "You're thinking it." He turned red instantly. Maybe, she echoed with a smirk, grabbing his hand and tugging him toward her room. "Then let's make the most of it before Dad doubles back with bed checks." When the world quieted again, they slipped outside together, hands brushing, the air warm and heavy with the scent of salt and pine. "Walk?" Hikari asked, tilting her head toward the stretch of trees beyond the boardwalk. Izuku nodded, grateful for the chance to breathe. The two of them meandered down a sandy trail, away from the noise of tourists. The farther they walked, the quieter it became. Just gulls overhead, the hiss of waves, and the crunch of their shoes against pine needles. It wasn't long before the trail widened into a small clearing, dotted with makeshift shelters. Blue tarps strung between trees. Fire pits circled by stones. Laundry lines sagging under patched clothes. A half-dozen figures moved about quietly, some older, some younger, even a few children. Izuku froze. Hikari's hand tightened around his. "This is a camp. Not tents for vacationers. Not students on a trip. A community living in the woods, half hidden, half forgotten." A man stirred a pot over the fire. A woman folded blankets. A boy no older than 10 clutched a battered toy car. Izuku didn't flinch at the sight of the tarps and fire pits. He'd lived this life himself. 1 year of cold nights, scavenged meals, and watching the world look the other way. The smell of wood smoke, damp clothes, and hunger was familiar. Too familiar. Hikari glanced at him, expecting shock, but Izuku only exhaled slowly and stepped forward. "Wait," she hissed, "you can't just..." But before she finished, a voice called out. "That's him." Heads turned. A woman paused in folding a blanket, her eyes narrowing in recognition. A teenager leaned against a tree, eyes bright despite his worn hoodie. A child tugged at his mother's hand, whispering, "That's Midoriya, isn't it? The one they're calling Exodus." Izuku froze, throat tight. Dozens of tired eyes fixed on him, not with fear, but with hope. "You're here to help us?" an older man asked, his voice rasping but steady. Izuku swallowed. He thought of Island, of the headlines, of the weight Aizawa and Mizuku had tried to shield him from. He looked at the patched shelters sagging under rainwater, the children clutching cracked toys. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm here to help." He walked the camp with quiet determination, Hikari at his side. He had a water barrel, he pressed his palm to the rusted rim. Metal bent under his touch, reshaping into a cleaner spout. He absorbed a quirk from a man whose gift produced a faint heat, then combined it with his own manipulation to boil and purify the water. Steam hissed, and for the first time in weeks, the water ran clear. And near the shelters, he brushed fingers against a young woman with a quirk that encouraged plant growth. With a breath, he layered her power through his amplifier, coaxing thick, living roots to anchor tarps and walls into the soil. Makeshift tents became sturdy shelters in moments. At the cooking fire, he borrowed another quirk, minor wind control, and used it with precise bursts of metal manipulation to funnel smoke away while stabilizing the flames. The food cooked faster, cleaner. Every step, every gesture, Izuku worked without hesitation, combining quirks with a fluid ease that looked almost natural. Productivity rippled through the camp. People whispered, some in awe, some in disbelief. Hikari watched, heart pounding. He wasn't just helping. He was transforming the camp. A child approached him, clutching a patched-up stuffed bear. Are you really gonna keep helping us? Or will the heroes send you away too? Izuku crouched to meet the boy's eyes. He smiled softly, though there was steel beneath it. I won't walk away, he promised. Not from you. The camp seemed to exhale all at once, hope flickering to life where there had only been survival. What began as a single visit became a rhythm. Every day, Izuku and Hikari would go on a date in town or the beach for a couple of hours, which had then slipped down the narrow forest trail. At first, the camp met them with wary gratitude. But as the days passed, that gratitude deepened into something else. Awe. Izuku came prepared. On the second morning, he arrived with a pouch of seeds he'd bought quietly at the market. Using the gardener's minor quirk he'd borrowed and amplified, he coaxed sprouts into neat rows of vegetables. By evening, the camp had the beginnings of a garden with food soon ready to spring. The next day, he rigged up rain catchers from salvaged barrels and metal scraps. With a touch, he shaped the frames smooth and sturdy, adding spouts to funnel water into clean storage bins. The children crowded around him, cheering as the first drops slid neatly into place. By midweek, he went further. One man's quirk let him generate small flecks of raw metal. Izuku borrowed it, amplifying the output until they had steady piles. Then, kneeling in the sand, he drew from the ocean itself, pulling up corroded fragments of iron and steel buried beneath the tide. With patient hands, he reshaped the raw metal into beams and plates, then compressed them. Using a boy's quirk, he transmuted their structure until they hardened into cement-like slabs. Together with Hikari and the camp residents, they laid the slabs into the earth, forming foundations, then walls. Tarps became roofs supported by real frames. Fire pits became kitchens. By the fifth day, the camp was no longer a scattering of shelters hidden in the trees. It looked like the skeleton of a village, rain catchers glinting in the sun, neat rows of crops sprouting green, solid walls rising against the wind. Each day more eyes followed Izuku. The whispers grew louder. Some called him Midoriya. More called him Exodus. A boy brought him a broken toy car and watched in wonder as Izuku mended the wheels with a flick of metal. A woman pressed his hand between hers and whispered, "You didn't forget us." That afternoon, while Izuku worked with a group of younger men to shape another frame, Hikari was approached by one of the older women, the one whose quirk had given Izuku the ability to attract birds for tonight's dinner. Her hands were worn, calloused from years of struggle, and her eyes were brimming with both hope and fear. "You're with him," the woman said quietly, glancing toward Izuku. "Tell me, is there a way we can stay? Will he keep us safe here? Please." Hikari's chest tightened. "Why are you asking me?" "Because he's everything they whispered about," the woman said, her voice breaking. "The boy who could change the world. The one who doesn't look away. And if he says we can stay, then maybe, for once, it will be true." Hikari followed the woman's gaze. Izuku's back was to them, sweat running down his neck as he braced a slab of cement into place, younger kids hauling stones at his direction. He looked alive in a way she'd never seen at UA or in battle. Alive because he was building. Because they believed in him. She swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. "He'll never abandon you. That much I know." The woman gripped her hand, rough fingers trembling. "Then we'll hold to that. To him." By the end of the week, when the sun dipped behind the treeline and the little community glowed with cook fires reflecting off their new walls, Hikari realized what she was really seeing. They weren't living in a camp anymore. Izuku had given them a village. And whether he knew it or not, the people already saw him as its founder, its protector, maybe even its savior. The last day. The sun was already climbing by the time they started loading the car. Bags thumped into the trunk, Ms. Joke calling out reminders about sunscreen towels, and the inevitable, "Did you pack the snacks?" Izuku tightened the straps on his duffel, glancing toward the trail that led into the woods. His chest felt heavy. "Mr. Aizawa," he said, voice quiet, "could Hikari and I go for one last walk before we leave? Just one more time." Aizawa didn't even look up from folding the tarp. "No. You two are already too comfortable sneaking around." His tone was flat, final. Hikari scowled, hands on her hips. It's not even like that. We're not. She cut herself off, biting back the rest, then softened her tone. It's important. Please. Aizawa's gaze flicked to her, then to Izuku. He frowned but didn't press. Fine. An hour. Be back before we're on the road. Izuku's shoulders eased. Thank you. The trail was too quiet. No laughter, no faint smoke from cook fires. Izuku felt it in his gut before they even reached the clearing. When they stepped through the trees, his chest locked. The little village he'd helped build was half destroyed. Tarps ripped down, rain catchers smashed. Piles of cement slabs he'd shaped were cracked, pushed aside. Rows of vegetables lay trampled into the dirt. Scattered clothing and bedding littered the ground, wet from the morning dew. No, Izuku whispered. He stepped forward, touching one of the slabs. Fresh boot prints cut across it. Heavy tread, police. Only a handful of people remained. The old woman with the bird quirk sat on a broken crate, clutching a torn blanket. A boy no older than 10 pressed into her side, eyes swollen from crying. When she saw Izuku, her face broke. They came at dawn, she rasped, voice trembling. Police. A pro-hero with them. Said we were trespassing on state land. Said it wasn't safe. Her hands shook as she spoke, her eyes wet with fury. They didn't care about the gardens. Didn't care about the clean water or the walls you gave us. They called it all hazardous structures. Hikari's jaw clenched. What did they do? They gave us 10 minutes, the woman whispered. 10 minutes to pack our lives. Anyone who didn't move fast enough, she stopped, covering her face. They threw our things into trucks. Medicine, clothes, even IDs. Said it was evidence of trespassing. Izuku's vision blurred. He looked at the boy, clutching a broken toy car he'd once repaired, tears streaking his cheeks. They said shelters would take us, the woman went on, her voice hoarse. But we've been down that road before. They separate families. They turn you out after a week. We tried to tell them. They didn't listen. Her eyes lifted to Izuku's, burning with grief. You gave us hope. You gave us something real. And in one morning they crushed it. Like we were nothing. Izuku's hands curled into fists, metal humming faintly in the dirt around him. His pulse roared. He could see it, ripping the trucks apart, dragging the police down, making them pay. Hikari's hand gripped his wrist hard. Izuku. Not here. Not like this. He stood frozen, chest heaving, the weight of the woman's words sinking into him. They destroyed everything, he whispered. The boy looked up at him with wide, pleading eyes. The old woman's voice broke again, softer now, almost begging. You said we could stay. You promised. Izuku's throat closed. He forced the hum of metal back down, though it burned in his chest like fire. They'll regret this, he said under his breath, voice trembling. Hikari squeezed his hand tighter, trying to ground him. I know. But right now they need you whole. Not broken. Izuku stared at the wreckage of the village, jaw clenched so tight it ached. The vacation was over. The peace was over. And the storm inside him was closer than ever. Izuku dropped to his knees in the mud, hands shaking as he pressed them to the broken slabs. Metal shards stirred, fragments clattering together as he forced them back into shape. He mended rain catchers, bent frames upright, straightened what he could. But it was no longer the same. The neat rows of vegetables were crushed. The woman with the plant quirk who had helped him coax life into the soil was gone. The man who had produced flecks of metal had been taken too. Their gifts, their presence, their trust, all missing. Izuku could rebuild walls, but not the people who had made this a home. By the time he staggered back, the clearing looked patched but hollow, more ghost town than village. The old woman still sat on her crate, clutching the boy close. She whispered thanks as he passed, but her voice carried more sorrow than hope. Izuku lowered his head. For the first time since arriving at the camp, he didn't feel like he'd given them something. He felt like he'd failed them. By the time they returned, the car was already packed. Ms. Joke stood by the passenger side, chatting briskly with Aizawa, but her expression softened when she caught Izuku's face. Pale, quiet, his eyes shadowed. Ready? She asked gently. Izuku just nodded, the word lodged in his throat. The drive started in silence, the road unspooling back toward Mizudafu. The ocean glittered faintly in the distance, but it no longer felt like freedom, only something slipping away. In the back seat, Hikari guided Izuku's head into her lap. He didn't resist. His shoulders trembled, and he pressed his face into the fabric of her shorts, muffling the uneven sound of his breaths. I promised them, he whispered, voice raw. I told them I wouldn't walk away, and then they were taken. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't protect them. Hikari stroked his hair, her own eyes stinging. You gave them more than anyone ever did. That matters. He shook his head, tears slipping free. It wasn't enough. Up front, Aizawa kept his eyes on the road, jaw tight. Ms. Joke glanced at him, then at the mirror, catching sight of Izuku curled small against Hikari. She lowered her voice. Something happened. Yeah, Aizawa muttered, hands tightening on the wheel. He's carrying something. Then we keep an eye on him. No questions yet. Just watch, Ms. Joke murmured. Aizawa gave a faint nod, headlights carving a steady path ahead. Behind them, Izuku's quiet crying filled the silence, grief spilling unchecked as the coastline disappeared in the rearview. But beneath the grief, another thought rooted itself in him like iron. Never again. UA campus, a week before summer camp. The sun was low, painting the courtyard in long shadows as Emi and Aizawa walked side by side. Students passed in the distance, voices carrying faintly on the breeze, but the two adults were quiet until Emi finally broke the silence. It was good, wasn't it? She said, hands folded behind her head. The trip. For the most part. Aizawa gave a non-committal grunt, scarf trailing at his side. She smirked faintly. That's your way of saying yes. He didn't argue. His gaze stayed fixed ahead. It was better than I expected. They got to be kids for a few days. Emi's smile softened, her tone quieter. Yeah. Our daughter holding hands on the boardwalk. Izuku almost smiling through half those games. Even you, Mr. Umbrellas and Silence, almost looked like you were enjoying yourself. Aizawa huffed through his nose, but his expression didn't shift. Then her voice lowered further. But something happened. With him. Aizawa's silence stretched before he answered. Yeah. He left with more weight than he came with. I don't know why. Emi frowned, remembering how Izuku had curled small in the back seat on the drive home. Hikari's hand tangled in his hair. He cried in her lap, Shoyuda. That wasn't exhaustion. That was deeper. Aizawa finally looked at her, his eyes steady but heavy. Whatever it was, he didn't tell us. And right now, he's already carrying more than he should. They walked a few steps more, the quiet of the campus folding around them. Emi sighed. We learned a lot, though. About them. About how much they mean to each other. Aizawa gave the smallest nod. That's why this next part will hit harder. She glanced at him, her smile gone. The trial? He nodded again, eyes sharp but tired. It's time. We can't keep it from him anymore. The weight of it settled between them as the school doors loomed ahead, the place where they'd find Izuku. For a moment, Ami's playful spark flickered back. I'll talk first. You tend to sound like the Grim Reaper. Aizawa muttered, because I usually am, but his eyes softened just a fraction. Together they stepped inside, carrying with them the echoes of a vacation that had been almost normal, and the knowledge that whatever peace Izuku found there, it was about to end. The clang of weights echoed through the gym, sharp against the lazy hum of cicadas outside. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, striping the floor in golden bars. Izuku finished a heavy set, muscles trembling, and let the bar lock back into place. He sat up, chest heaving, wiping sweat from his brow. Hikari tossed him a towel, arms crossed. You're overdoing it, she warned. Camps is ahead of us. You need recovery, not more strain. Izuku gave a faint, tired smile. And you're saying that after tripling your squats? She smirked, bumping his shoulder. That's different. I don't break like you do. Before he could answer, the gym door creaked open. Both turned. Aizawa and Emi stepped inside, their shadows stretching across the mats. They watched for a beat, the weights, the sheen of sweat, the stubborn fire still burning in the kid's eyes. Emi offered a small smile. Training even before camp? She said softly. You two don't know how to sit still. Izuku rubbed at the back of his neck, uneasy. We just don't want to fall behind. Hikari's eyes narrowed. What's going on? The lightness in Emi's voice faded. She glanced at Aizawa, who gave the faintest nod. We need to talk, Aizawa said. His tone was flat, but it carried weight. Izuku frowned, towel clenched in his hands. Talk about what? Emi's expression softened, though her voice was steady. About the trial, sweetheart. The one the government is pushing. We didn't want you blindsided later, not after camp, not by someone else's mouth. You need to hear it from us. The gym seemed to fall silent. Even the cicadas outside faded away. Izuku blinked once, twice. The towel slipped from his hands, landing on the floor with a dull thud. His throat worked, but no words came. He sat frozen on the bench, his breath shallow, the weight of their words pressing down heavier than anything he'd lifted in training. Hikari's hand settled on his shoulder, warm and grounding. "Izuku," she whispered. But Izuku's eyes had gone distant, glassy. His lips parted, voice no louder than a breath. "A trial." Aizawa's gaze was steady but unreadable. Emi stepped closer, kneeling so her eyes were level with his. "We'll fight it. Yue's lawyers, us, you're not alone in this. But you needed to know before the world tried to tell you." Izuku lowered his head, silent. His shoulders trembled once, then went still. Hikari leaned in closer, protective. Emi reached as if to comfort him, but paused. The boy was already folding inward, carrying the weight in silence. The room stayed quiet, the air thick with something heavier than grief. Izuku Midoriya had just heard for the first time that the world wanted him on trial. And the knowledge crushed him. Izuku's fists clenched until his knuckles went white. His voice came out raw, ragged. "Why me? Why is my life the one on trial? Where was the trial for the ones who destroyed that camp? Where was justice for them?" He shot to his feet, the bench screeching behind him. His hands trembled, his chest heaving. They were just trying to live. And for 1 week, it worked. We grew food. We made water catchers. I even turned scraps into walls. For 1 week they had homes. They had hope. And then it was gone. Crush. Scattered like trash. His voice broke, his shoulders hunched. No one stopped it. No one cared. Hikari stepped closer, her hand finding his arm. "Izuku." He shook his head hard, eyes shining. "I know what that feels like. To be nothing. To be walked past like you don't exist. To have people look right at you and decide you don't matter. I lived like that for a year. No home. No safety. Just trying to survive while everyone else pretended I wasn't there." Emi's breath caught. Aizawa's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet, letting Izuku speak. "And now?" Izuku's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Now that I can help, now that I use this curse of a quirk to build instead of destroy, they don't see that. They don't care. All they want is to drag me into a courtroom, call me dangerous, make me another headline." His hands curled into fists, shaking harder. "If they spent half as much energy protecting those people as they do trying to cage me, the world would already be better." His voice cracked, rising. "But they don't. They never did. Not when I was quirkless. Not when I was powerless. Not when I finally started saving people." Hikari's eyes burned, her grip firm on him. Emi pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting tears. Aizawa's gaze was steady, sharp, piecing it all together without pressing further. Izuku turned away, voice breaking into a whisper. "I won't let it happen again. Ever." The words hung heavy, more vow than promise. He turned and strode out, his footsteps echoing down the hall. "Izuku." Hikari started, moving after him. But Emi caught her arm, gentle but firm. "Let him go." Hikari pulled against her grip, frustration in her eyes. "He shouldn't be alone right now." "I'll talk to him," Aizawa said flatly, already following Izuku out, scarf trailing at his side. The door shut behind him, leaving Hikari with her mother. She folded her arms, voice tight. "He's been carrying it since the beach. The camp, it broke him. He thinks he failed them. That's why he's so angry." Emi's usual brightness softened into something heavier. She brushed Hikari's hair back from her face. "And you knew?" Hikari swallowed hard. "I was there with him." Before Emi could answer, her phone buzzed. She dug it out, sighed and answered. "Yeah. Talk to me." For a minute she listened, her face unreadable. Then the words on the other end seemed to click. Her voice snapped, sharper than Hikari had ever heard. "What do you mean All Might won't publicly support?" Hikari froze. Emi pressed a hand to her temple, pacing. "No, don't dance around it. Say it plain. He's not uneasy about the press. He's uneasy about Izuku, isn't he?" Her free hand curled into a fist. "That boy fought beside him. Saved him. And now you're telling me All Might's afraid of him? That he doesn't want to stand in court because he still can't decide if Midoriya is a hero or a threat?" Her voice shook with fury. "Unbelievable. He'll smile for the world, but when it comes to standing with the kid who nearly died at his side, he hides." She stopped pacing, her jaw tight. "And don't tell me about this case either. He's skipping the summer camp, isn't he?" Her eyes blazed. "Call it what you want, but I know what it is. Avoidance. He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to face Izuku." Her voice rose again, sharp enough to cut. "No. You tell Toshinori Yagi this. Fear doesn't make him cautious, it makes him a coward. And Izuku deserves better than a coward's silence." She stabbed the call off and stood trembling, phone still clutched in her hand. Hikari's voice was small. Mom? Emi exhaled hard, shoulders stiff. It's worse than I thought, Hika. All Might isn't protecting his image, he's protecting himself. He's afraid of Izuku. Still uneasy about what he is. Her expression darkened, a rare steel replacing her usual warmth. And now he won't even show his face at camp. He'd rather bury himself in work than stand where Izuku might look him in the eye. Emi looked toward the door Aizawa had gone through, her chest tight. And when Izuku finds out, that fear will cut deeper than any trial. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Izuku sat hunched on a stone bench, his elbows braced to his knees, his face buried in his hands. His breath came hard, uneven, part exhaustion, part frustration still burning in his chest. Soft steps approached. Aizawa lowered himself onto the bench beside him, silent for a long moment. I don't blame you for being angry, Aizawa said at last, voice flat but steady. You should be. Izuku didn't move, but his fingers dug tighter into his hair. Aizawa leaned back slightly, eyes on the amber sky. When I was your age, I wasn't much different. Saw things I couldn't fix. People I couldn't save. A system that picked who deserved protection and who didn't. Izuku finally looked up, eyes red, jaw trembling. So what did you do? For a while? Aizawa's mouth tugged in the faintest grimace. I let it eat at me. Trained harder, fought dirtier, burned myself out trying to outpace the system. All it did was make me bitter. His gaze softened, just slightly. Then I met people who saw the good I'd forgotten. People like Emi. She saw light in places I'd written off as hopeless, saw good in me when I didn't. And little by little, that changed me. Reminded me that cynicism doesn't save anyone. People do. Izuku's throat worked. He lowered his head again, voice low. But the camp, those people, I tried and it wasn't enough. And now the same system that ignored them wants to put me on trial. His hands curled into fists. How do I funnel that into anything good? Aizawa studied him for a beat, then spoke firmly. You already have. You built homes, food, water. You gave them dignity. That's proof that even when the system fails, you don't have to. That's what you hold on to. Izuku blinked hard, lip trembling. Don't waste your anger, Aizawa pressed. Don't let it hollow you out. Use it. Emmet. Make it fuel for something better, not just for you but for the next people who'll need you. Izuku's breath came shaky, his hands still trembling. But the fire in his eyes shifted. Less wild, more focused, like embers stoked into direction instead of burning out of control. Fuel, he muttered, almost to himself. Aizawa nodded once. Exactly. Fire can burn down or light the way. The choice is yours. For the first time since the weight room, Izuku let out a shaky sound that almost resembled a laugh. That sounds like something Ms. Joke would say. Aizawa's lip twitched faintly. Don't tell her I stole her material. She'll never let me live it down. The air had cooled, the sky bleeding from amber into deep purple. Aizawa stood, brushing the dust from his hands. Well, this has been an eventful day, he said, tone matter-of-fact but not unkind. Emi, Hikari and I are heading home. You need rest too, Midoriya. We'll be back tomorrow. Izuku blinked, lifting his head. Oh, right, tomorrow. Aizawa adjusted his scarf, his gaze steady. Think on what I said. Anger can eat you alive or it can drive you forward. Don't waste it. He gave one last look, sharp, measuring, then walked toward the building, leaving Izuku alone in the quiet. Izuku sat back on the bench, staring after him. His chest still ached, but his mind replayed the words. Fuel, choice, fire can burn down or light the way. But it wasn't Aizawa's voice that lingered. It was Hikari's face. The way she'd held his hand like it wasn't dangerous. The way she smiled at him even when the world whispered he was cursed. The way she believed. A warmth tugged through his chest, cutting against the sharp edges of his anger. If the world only saw him as dangerous, then fine, he would use that fear not to destroy but to build. To carve out a future where no camp would be burned, no child abandoned, no one left to rot because the system said they weren't worth saving. His fists clenched, not in despair but with new resolve. I'll use this anger, he thought, steady now. I'll use it to build a better world. His eyes softened as he imagined Hikari there in that world, laughing, safe, free to touch his hand without hiding it. Something worth protecting. Something worth creating. Izuku stood from the bench, his fists still trembling but this time not from despair. The vow he'd made in the courtyard wouldn't sit quietly in his chest. It demanded motion. If I'm going to build a better world, I need to start now. His feet carried him across campus almost on instinct. The main halls were quiet, most students already gone, but the support wing still hummed faintly in the distance. By the time he pushed open the lab doors, the familiar scent of oil, metal, and solder washed over him, steadying his breath. The room was dim, machines powered down for the night, but that only made the scattered tools and half-finished projects stand out more clearly. He flicked on a desk lamp, the warm glow spilling over blueprints and scraps of alloy. Izuku rolled up his sleeves. His chest still ached with anger, but the thought of Hikari, her smile, her stubbornness, the way she believed in him when no one else did, softened its edges. I'll use this anger. Not to destroy. To build. His hands moved with restless purpose, sifting through metal scraps, sketching rough shapes on blueprint paper, scratching them out and trying again. None of it was clean yet. None of it good enough. But every line, every smudge sharpened the thought in his chest, guided by her face in his mind, Hikari smiling at him, believing in him. She deserves more than words, he whispered. I need to make something real. Something that protects her. Something that lasts. Metal rasped under his quirk, bending and groaning as he coaxed it into a crude outline. Sparks hissed from a grinder, flickering shadows across the walls. A piece took shape on the workbench, jagged, uneven, with wires jutting from one side. Barely a start, but something. Izuku leaned back, sweat running down his temple, his hands aching from how tightly he'd gripped the tools. The unfinished fragment sat in the lamp's circle of light, unpolished and rough, but holding the seed of an idea. He stared at it chest tight. Then softly. This is the beginning. He closed his hand around the crude shape, feeling its weight even in its half-formed state. Whatever the world decided about him, whatever the trial or the headlines screamed, this would be his truth. A vow not yet finished, but already forged in intent. The next morning. The office was warm with early morning light, cicadas humming faintly outside. Aizawa leaned against the wall, arms folded, while Nizu sat behind his desk, paws resting neatly on the speakerphone. The line clicked, then filled with the familiar voice. All Might, Nizu said smoothly. Thank you for taking the call. Of course, Toshinori's voice came low and heavy. Though I suspect this isn't a courtesy chat. Yes, Nizu replied. Because I'd like to discuss your recent choices. Declining to attend the summer camp. Refusing to make a statement while Midoriya is dragged through the courts and the press. Burying yourself in a case, instead of your responsibilities here at UA. Why? Yes, Toshinori answered quickly. Well, the case is complicated. Demands my full attention. I won't be able to attend the summer camp. Best if I focus my energy here. Nizu's tone was mild, but his ears twitched. And this case happens to involve young Mirio Togata, and you passing your quirk into him, does it? The silence on the other end stretched too long. He is promising, Toshinori admitted at last. I've begun training him. I believe passing one for all to him is the best path forward. He's stable, strong. The symbol the world needs. Aizawa's voice cut in flat and sharp. And Midoriya? The kid who fought beside you on Island? The one who's about to be dragged into a courtroom while you hide behind semantics. I'm not hiding, Toshinori said too fast. His breath hitched. I'm trying to prevent disaster. You didn't see it the way I did, how people gather around that boy. The control, yes, but also the pull. The same kind of pull all for one had. If I stand beside him, if I encourage it, what if I'm the reason he falls? Nizu leaned forward, paws folded, his voice cool and precise. So you tell yourself Mirio is your duty? But duty is not what drives you, Toshinori. Fear is. You call it a case because it's easier than admitting the truth. You're avoiding Midoriya. Static hummed through the line. Toshinori's silence said more than words. Nizu's eyes glinted. You think silence spares him? It doesn't. Every time you dodge a question, every time you step aside, you prove the whispers right, that you don't believe in him. And the boy notices. The whole world notices. Your argument with him at the press conference still runs on repeat across every network. Toshinori's voice cracked low. Maybe they're right. Maybe I already broke him. Aizawa's gaze was steel. You did. And you're doing it again right now. Nizu's tail flicked once. If you cannot face him, then admit it's for your sake, not his. You train Mirio because it is safe. You abandon Midoriya because he terrifies you. But understand this, Toshinori, your avoidance will not protect him. It will destroy him faster than any villain. Aizawa's tone was flat, cutting through the static. You're just afraid. And instead of helping him, you leave him to walk alone. Another pause. Then quietly, yes. Nisa's ears flicked forward. Fear is natural, Toshinori. But your fear has blinded you. Midoriya has never asked for your blessing. He never needed your championing. What he needs is for those who see his burden to guide him, not abandon him out of dread. Nisa's eyes gleamed sharp. You tell yourself you're protecting him by staying away, but it is not his safety you guard. It is your pain. You retreat because it is easier than facing what he represents. The line went silent except for the sound of All Might's uneven breathing until it clicked dead. For a long moment the office stayed silent, the cicadas loud outside. Aizawa finally muttered, voice rough as gravel. He calls it duty. I call it cowardice. Nisa's eyes stayed on the dead receiver, sharp and calculating. Then we make sure Midoriya does not fall. With or without Toshinori Yagi. Campus was quieter than usual, only half the dorms occupied as students trickled back for pre-camp training. Cicadas buzzed in the heat, sprinklers hissed across the lawns, and every day carried the same rhythm. Train, sweat, laugh, wait. For Izuku though, the week wasn't just waiting. It was building. Day 1. The support lab was nearly empty, just Mei hammering away at some half-finished contraption that sparked every few seconds. Izuku sat hunched at the far workbench, palms pressed to a scrap of alloy, his quirk bending and smoothing the shape again and again. Too heavy. Too sharp. He muttered under his breath, reshaping until sweat dotted his brow. By the time he finally left, the sky was already dark. Hikari was curled on the lounge couch, half watching a movie. She gave him a mock glare when he slid in beside her. You're vanishing a lot lately, she muttered. But her head found his shoulder anyway. He opened his mouth to reply, but her breathing slowed before the credits even rolled. She'd fallen asleep early. Izuku didn't move, letting her rest, even as guilt and resolve tangled in his chest. Day 2. The training fields baked under the summer sun. Hikari grinned like a cat as she knocked Izuku flat, straddling him before leaning down. Guess you'll need me at camp, she teased, her hair brushing his cheek. He sputtered, scrambling upright with a blush. Later, when they sat in the shade, her grin faded. She pressed a hand to her stomach briefly, her expression unreadable. Lunch didn't sit right, she said with a shrug. Too much cafeteria curry. Izuku tilted his head, concern flickering in his eyes, but she flashed him a quick smirk as if daring him to push it. He let it go. That night, he was back in the lab, the alloy under his palms humming as his quirk shaped it closer to his vision. Day 3. They lay side by side on the dorm rooftop, the shingles still warm from the day. Izuku pointed out constellations, rambling about mythological names and navigation until his voice went hoarse. Normally, Hikari poked fun at him for nerd lectures, but tonight her responses grew softer, slower. You're making me sleepy, she murmured at last, eyes half-lidded. Within minutes, her breathing evened out, her head sliding onto his arm. Izuku stared at the stars long after she drifted off, his chest aching with something he couldn't name. Later, when he sat at his desk sketching by lamplight, the shapes he drew weren't just blueprints. They were vows. Day 4. Mei caught a glimpse of polished metal on his workbench before he shoved it under a rag. She grinned knowingly. Not a weapon? Izuku stammered, cheeks red. Mei only hummed and went back to her own tinkering. That evening, when he offered Hikari a soda in the lounge, her favorite flavor, she wrinkled her nose. Too sweet, she muttered, handing it back. You drink it. He blinked, surprised, but shrugged, taking a sip himself. She leaned against his arm, quieter than usual, and he pretended not to notice. Day 5. On their last evening before camp, Hikari tugged Izuku along the quiet campus paths, insisting they stretch their legs before the long trip. She chattered as usual, but halfway down the walkway her steps faltered. She leaned against the railing for a breath, hand brushing her forehead. Guess I didn't sleep well, she murmured with a sheepish grin. Before he could ask, she tugged his hand and pulled him onward as if nothing had happened. Izuku followed, his other hand clenched tight in his pocket. The finished project pressed cool and solid against his palm, ready at last. Izuku began to lead them to the rooftop where they normally sat for lunch during the school year. You dragging me up here right before camp? She teased, raising an eyebrow. What's so important you couldn't just say it downstairs? Izuku turned, his cheeks red but his eyes steady. Because I wanted this to be just us. He opened his hand. A simple band of metal gleamed in his palm, sunlight catching on the faint etched pattern along its surface. Hikari blinked, her playful smile faltering. Izuku, what? It's not just a gift, he blurted, then steadied his voice. It's a promise. I made this for you. It's a shield, When you activate it, it creates a barrier around you for about 5 seconds. Strong enough to stop high-caliber rounds. Maybe even more. Her eyes widened, but he kept going, words spilling faster. It recharges if you plug it into an outlet, though it takes a while. It's not perfect. I only managed to finish it this week, and I had help. May and Melissa too. But the design, the work, he held it out with trembling fingers. It's mine. For you. Hikari stared at the ring, then at him. Are you proposing to me, Midoriya? That's very bold, you're still high school? She said in a joking manner as she winked at him. He froze, cheeks blazing, but forced himself to answer seriously. Not today. But one day, yeah. I will. Hikari's teasing grin vanished. She went quiet, her gaze dropping to the small band in his hand. The rooftop wind filled the silence. Finally, she reached for it, slipping it onto her finger. She turned her hand slowly, watching it gleam in the light. So it's a promise ring, she murmured. Izuku nodded. Yeah. A promise that I'll always protect you. Even if I can't reach you in time. Her lips twitched into a small smile. Let's test it then. Izuku blinked. What? She stepped back, her eyes glinting with mischief. Come on. You didn't think I'd just take your word for it, did you? He swallowed hard, then nodded, lifting his hand. With a breath, he summoned a shard of steel, spinning it into a blunt projectile. Ready? Always, she said, raising her hand with the ring. The shard shot forward, and a soft hum filled the air. A translucent barrier snapped into place around Hikari, glowing faintly as the metal ricocheted off harmlessly. She laughed, the sound bright against the rooftop breeze. 5 seconds, right? She said, watching the glow fade as quickly as it came. Izuku nodded, relief flooding him. Yeah. Then it needs time to recharge. But it works. Hikari looked at the ring again, her smile gentling. You really made this for me. Izuku's chest tightened, his voice soft but firm. For you. Always. Hikari slipped the ring onto her finger, tilting it toward the sun. A grin tugged at her lips, sly but affectionate. So, she murmured, stepping close, her tone low and playful. If this counts as a very early proposal, shouldn't we celebrate it? Izuku's face heated, but instead of stumbling, he managed a small, crooked smile. We've celebrated before. Her eyes glinted, her hand tightening around his. Then you know exactly what I mean. For once he didn't look away. He only squeezed her hand back, voice quiet but steady. Then let's make it mean something. Just us. Her teasing faded into something gentler, warmer. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his, the new band gleaming faintly between them. Good answer, hero. The rooftop breeze carried their silence as they lingered in each other's arms. Then, without another word, she tugged him toward the door. No hesitation, no pretense. Just the two of them slipping away together, laughter hushed and hearts already decided. The night swallowed them and the rest went unspoken. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share and donate for more videos.